Good evening, and welcome back to Sleepy Pages of History. Find a comfortable position, settle in, and allow the day to slowly drift into the background. Let your breathing become a little slower. Let your shoulders relax, and as the sounds of the present grow softer around you, allow your thoughts to wander gently toward another place, another time, and another world. Tonight, we will journey to Pompeii. Before we begin, if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past, you are always welcome to subscribe. And while you're getting comfortable, let me know where in the world you're listening from tonight. Now, let us travel together to the shores of the Bay of Naples, nearly 2,000 years ago. Picture a peaceful Roman city resting beneath a bright Mediterranean sky. Morning sunlight falls across stone streets, polished smooth by countless footsteps. Water trickles steadily from public fountains. Small gardens glow with green leaves and colorful flowers. The scent of bread drifts from nearby ovens. Merchants prepare their stalls for another ordinary day. In the distance stands a mountain. It rises gently above the landscape, its slopes covered with vineyards, orchards, and scattered farms. From the city below, it appears calm and beautiful, familiar, almost comforting. This mountain is Mount Vesuvius. Today, its name is known throughout the world. Yet for the people of ancient Pompeii, it was simply part of the landscape, a constant presence beyond the rooftops, a landmark visible from streets, courtyards, and balconies. The people who lived here did not wake each morning thinking about danger. They thought about work. They thought about family. They thought about meals, business, friendships, repairs to their homes, and plans for the coming weeks. Like people, everywhere, they lived inside the ordinary rhythms of daily life. And that is where our story begins. Not with disaster, not with ash, not with the famous Pompeii eruption that would one day preserve the city beneath layers of volcanic material. Instead, we begin with life, because what makes Pompeii so fascinating is not simply the way it ended. It is the way it lived. Over the centuries, countless ancient cities have disappeared. Their buildings crumbled, their streets vanished. Their stories faded into fragments. Pompeii was different. For reasons that no one could have understood at the time, an extraordinary record of ordinary life survived. The result was something remarkably rare, a preserved Roman city, a place where homes still stand, where shops remain visible, where painted walls continue to display their colors, where graffiti still carries the voices of people long gone, where ovens, gardens, temples, workshops, and public baths continue to tell quiet stories about everyday existence. In that sense, Pompeii offers something more personal than many famous historical sites. It allows us to step inside a day, not the day of an emperor, not the day of a great military victory, not the day of a famous political speech, simply a day filled with errands, conversations, meals, work, laughter, routine, the kinds of moments that usually disappear from history. Tonight, we will spend time among those moments. We will walk the streets of ancient Pompeii. We will pass beneath balconies and through crowded marketplaces. We will visit private homes hidden behind plain doorways. We will listen to fountains singing quietly in public squares. We will explore bakeries, gardens, bathhouses, workshops, and temples. We will meet merchants, laborers, craftsmen, children, travelers, and families. Slowly, and without hurry, we will enter the world they once knew. Picture the city as dawn approaches. The sky over the Bay of Naples begins to brighten with pale gold light. Fishing boats move across calm water. The sea reflects the first colors of morning. Within the city walls, shutters begin to open, household servant sweeps a courtyard. A baker prepares his ovens. A fountain continues its steady flow exactly as it did the day before. Somewhere nearby, a dog stretches awake in a shaded corner. The city is beginning another day. Nothing feels unusual. Nothing feels historic. And perhaps that is what makes Pompeii so moving. The people who lived here had no idea that future generations would one day study their homes, their tools, their artwork, and even their handwritten messages. They could not know that millions of people would someday walk their streets. They could not know that archaeologists would uncover their city centuries later. They could not know that Pompeii would become one of the most famous places in the world. To them, it was simply home. This reminds us of something important. History is often remembered through great events. Wars, kings, battles, empires, yet most human lives are not lived through extraordinary moments. Most lives are lived through ordinary days. A meal shared with family, a walk through familiar streets, a visit to the market, the sound of water flowing nearby, the warmth of sunlight in a garden. Pompeii preserved those moments with remarkable clarity, and because of that, the city continues to feel surprisingly close to us. The centuries between then and now seem to shrink. The distance becomes smaller. The people become easier to recognize. Their worries feel familiar. Their routines feel familiar. Even their jokes sometimes feel familiar. What makes this fascinating is that Pompeii allows us to see ancient Rome not only through emperors and monuments, but through ordinary people. People who woke up early. People who worked long hours. People who decorated their homes. People who cared for children. People who hoped for good harvests. People who planned for tomorrow. As we continue our journey tonight, we will spend much of our time in that world. The world before history changed. The world before the city became frozen in memory. The world before the name Pompeii became known across continents and centuries. For now, let us leave behind the modern world for a little while. Let us follow the sea breeze inland from the Bay of Naples. Let us walk beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. Let us enter the streets of Pompeii. Ahead of us lie fountains, gardens, painted walls, and quiet neighborhoods. Beyond them rises Mount Vesuvius, peaceful beneath the sky. And beneath that sleeping mountain, a remarkable Roman city waits for us to begin exploring. So settle comfortably. Allow the rhythm of the past to slow your thoughts, and let us take our first gentle steps into Pompeii. Beneath the sleeping mountain, the world around Pompeii was shaped by beauty. Before we enter more deeply into the streets of the city, it is worth pausing for a while outside its walls, beneath the wide sky of Campania. Here, the land opened gently toward the Bay of Naples, where the sea curved like a quiet blue bowl beneath the sun. Imagine standing there in the morning. A soft breeze moves in from the water. The air carries the faint scent of salt, earth, and green vines. In the distance, fishing boats drift slowly across the bay. Behind them, the coastline bends and fades into pale light. This was the world that held Pompeii. It was not an isolated city. It belonged to a landscape of farms, roads, villas, vineyards, harbors, and neighboring towns. Travelers moved through this region on foot, by cart, and by boat. Goods arrived from the sea. Produce came down from the countryside. Messages, rumors, and visitors passed from one settlement to another. The Bay of Naples was one of the most beautiful places in the Roman world. Its waters were calm enough to invite trade and travel. Its hillsides were fertile. Its climate was mild. Wealthy Romans came here for rest, pleasure, and sea air. Farmers worked the soil. Merchants watched the roads. Sailors watched the wind. And above it all stood Mount Vesuvius. To modern ears, the name carries a quiet shadow, but to the people of ancient Pompeii, Vesuvius did not seem like a threat. It did not appear as a place of danger. It looked like a generous mountain, rising over fields and vineyards. Its slopes were not bare. They were alive with cultivation. Grapevines climbed the land in neat rows. Orchards grew in the volcanic soil. Small farms rested along the lower hills. In the changing light of the day, the mountain could look soft and peaceful, almost like a guardian watching over the countryside. What makes this fascinating is that the very land that made the region so fertile also came from older fire. Long before Pompeii became a Roman city, the ground beneath it had been shaped by ancient volcanic activity. Layers of old lava and ash had helped create rich soil. Stone used in streets and buildings often came from the volcanic landscape itself. The past was beneath their feet. Yet it did not speak loudly. A person walking through Pompeii might feel only the firmness of stone paving beneath their sandals. A farmer might notice only that the soil was dark and good for vines. A builder might see useful rock. A merchant might see wine, fruit, and oil traveling toward the market. Over time, people became used to the mountain. This is often how human beings live with landscapes. Mountains become familiar, rivers become familiar, the sea becomes familiar. Even places that hold hidden forces can seem gentle when generations have built their homes beside them. For the people of Pompeii, Vesuvius was part of the ordinary horizon. Children may have grown up seeing it every day. Travelers used it as a landmark. Farmers watched the seasons move across its slopes. At sunrise, the mountain caught the light. At sunset, it became a darker shape against the glowing sky. It is easy to imagine someone pausing at the edge of the city in the evening, looking toward the vineyards, hearing insects in the warm air, and seeing Vesuvius standing quietly beyond the roofs. There would have been no reason to fear it, not in the way we understand it now. Pompeii's position gave the city many advantages. It stood near the sea, but not directly upon it in the same way as a harbor town. Roads connected it to the wider Roman world. The nearby River Sarno helped link inland farms with trade routes. Agricultural estates surrounded the city, sending goods inward and outward. The result was a place that felt both local and connected. Pompeii had its own neighborhoods, fountains, shops, shrines, and daily habits. But it was also part of a larger network. Wine from nearby vineyards could travel elsewhere. Imported goods could arrive from distant shores. News could move along roads and across water. In this way, the city lived between mountain and sea. Behind it rose Vesuvius. Before it stretched the Bay of Naples. Around it lay fertile fields, villas, gardens, and working farms. This geography shaped everything. It shaped what people ate. It shaped what they traded. It shaped the materials they used to build. It shaped the views from their homes. It shaped the smell of the air, the sound of the roads, and the rhythm of daily life. Imagine a farmer beginning work before the heat of the day. The soil is dark beneath his hands. The vines need tending. The leaves catch the early light. Somewhere below, the city is waking. From a distance, Pompeii may appear as a cluster of walls, roofs, and towers resting quietly on the plain. The farmer may hear a cart on the road. He may see smoke rising from morning fires. He may glance toward the mountain without thinking very much about it. This matters because Pompeii was not only a city of stone, it was a city of landscape. Its life depended on the land around it. The vineyards on the slopes, the farms beyond the gates, the water flowing into fountains, the roads leading toward the bay, the sea bringing distant goods and distant people. All of these made Pompeii what it was. The beauty of the region was not separate from daily life. It was daily life. A person walking through the city might pass a wall painting of a garden, then step outside and see real greenery beyond the buildings. A merchant might sell wine whose grapes had grown under the gaze of Vesuvius. A cook might prepare food flavored by produce from the surrounding countryside. The natural world and the human world were woven together. And this is one reason Pompeii still holds such power over the imagination. It was not built in a barren place. It belonged to a luminous world of sea light, volcanic soil, warm breezes, and cultivated slopes. Even the mountain itself, so famous now for what came later, must first be remembered as the people of Pompeii knew it. Quiet, green, familiar, beautiful. As the day moved on, light would travel across the landscape. Morning brightness would settle over the bay. Midday heat would warm the stones. Afternoon shadows would lengthen beside garden walls. In the evening, the sky might soften into rose and gold, and the outline of Vesuvius would darken slowly against the fading light. Below it, Pompeii continued. Fountains flowed, doors opened and closed, carts rolled through streets. People returned from the fields. Smoke rose from kitchens. Lamps were prepared for night. There is a gentle wonder in imagining this. A city beneath a mountain beneath the sky. A landscape so ordinary to its people, and yet so unforgettable to us. For now, the mountain sleeps. The bay is calm. The vineyards are green. And Pompeii rests between them, waiting for us to walk through its gates. Now that we have spent a little time in the countryside beyond the walls, let us enter the city itself. Imagine approaching Pompeii on a clear morning. The air is already warming beneath the Mediterranean sun. Ahead, stone walls mark the edge of the city. Travelers arrive along well-used roads. Merchants guide animals carrying goods. Farmers return from nearby fields. Visitors pass through the gates, joining the steady flow of daily life. Nothing feels extraordinary. This is simply another day in a Roman city. And yet, nearly 2,000 years later, we are still able to walk many of these same streets. That is one of Pompeii's greatest gifts. Its roads remain. Its intersections remain. Even the marks left by countless wheels remain. The city still remembers where people walked. As you step onto one of Pompeii's streets, the first thing you might notice is the stone beneath your feet. The roads are not smooth in the modern sense. Large paving stones fit together across the width of the street. Years of use have polished some surfaces, while leaving others rough beneath a sandal or shoe. The stones hold the memory of movement that continued day after day. People walking to market, children running errands, merchants transporting goods, laborers carrying tools, travelers arriving from neighboring towns. Each journey left a small trace, and over many generations, those traces became part of the city itself. What makes this fascinating is that many streets still preserve deep grooves cut into the stone. These wheel ruts remain visible today. They were created by carts passing over the same routes again and again, year after year. Imagine standing beside one of them. The groove curves gently through the paving stone. It is not the mark of a single journey. It is the result of thousands of ordinary mornings, thousands of ordinary afternoons, thousands of ordinary returns home. This reminds us that cities are built as much by repetition as by grand events. The daily routine of countless people slowly shapes the world around them. As we continue walking, another curious feature appears ahead. Large stepping stones cross the street. At first glance, they seem unusual. Why place stone blocks directly in the roadway? The answer lies in a practical problem. Like many Roman cities, Pompeii needed ways to manage water, waste, and street runoff. During wet weather, water could flow along the roads. The stepping stones allowed pedestrians to cross without wading through muddy or unpleasant conditions. Imagine approaching one now. 3 broad stones rise above the surface of the street. You step from one to the next while a cart passes nearby. The spacing has been carefully arranged, wide enough for wheels to pass between them, narrow enough for people to cross comfortably. Simple, practical, elegant, the Romans often excelled at solutions like this. And because Pompeii preserved so much of its urban landscape, these details still speak clearly across the centuries. Nearby, the sound of water draws your attention. A public fountain stands at a street corner. Fresh water flows steadily into a stone basin. The sound is gentle and constant, a quiet stream of water spilling over worn stone. In a busy city, fountains served an important purpose. Not every household enjoyed direct access to running water. Many residents collected water from public sources. Throughout the day, people arrived carrying containers, jars, and buckets. Imagine pausing beside the fountain. Someone fills a clay vessel. Another waits patiently nearby. A brief conversation begins. News is exchanged. A neighbor offers a greeting. A child splashes a hand into the cool water before being gently reminded not to make trouble. Life unfolds naturally around the fountain. This matters because cities are not only collections of buildings, they are collections of encounters, places where people meet unexpectedly, places where daily routines overlap, places where strangers become familiar faces. The fountain is one such place. As we move onward, the street begins to reveal more of its character. Some roads are relatively broad, others feel narrower and more intimate. Sunlight falls between buildings, creating alternating bands of brightness and shade. The walls on either side rise close enough that voices carry easily. Footsteps echo softly from stone surfaces. A donkey cart approaches from ahead. The animal moves patiently through the street, accustomed to the sounds and rhythms of the city. Its hooves strike the paving stones with a steady rhythm. The cart itself may carry food, pottery, tools, cloth, or building materials. Trade moves constantly through Pompeii, not in dramatic caravans or grand processions, but through countless small journeys like this one. A merchant transporting goods, a worker delivering supplies, a farmer bringing produce into town. Together, these movements keep the city alive. Imagine stepping aside as the cart passes. The driver nods politely. The wheels settle naturally into grooves worn by previous carts. Then, the sound gradually fades down the street. For a moment, only distant voices remain. Perhaps a dog barks somewhere nearby. Perhaps you hear the creak of a wooden door opening. Perhaps the breeze carries the faint scent of bread from a bakery several streets away. These are the sounds of Pompeii, not the sounds of history books, not the sounds of famous events, simply the sounds of people living their lives. As we continue walking, neighborhoods begin to emerge. Each part of the city possesses its own small personality. Some areas feel busy and commercial. Shops open directly onto the street. Customers arrive and depart. goods are displayed where passers-by can see them. Other streets feel quieter. Homes stand behind solid walls. Doors reveal little about what lies beyond them. The activity inside remains hidden from public view. This contrast is one of Pompeii's most intriguing qualities. From the street, many buildings appear modest. Plain walls, simple entrances, little indication of wealth or beauty. Yet behind those doors often waited entirely different worlds. Courtyards, gardens, fountains, painted rooms, private spaces invisible to those passing outside. We will explore those hidden worlds later. For now, let us remain in the streets. The streets are where the city introduces itself. Imagine turning a corner. Ahead stands another public fountain. Beyond it, sunlight glitters on wet stone. A group of neighbors pauses in conversation. A worker carries tools over one shoulder. A child hurries past with an errand to complete. The scene feels surprisingly familiar, and perhaps that is what continues to draw people toward Pompeii. The city does not feel distant. It feels recognizable. The architecture may differ, the clothing may differ, the language may differ, yet the rhythms of daily life remain deeply human. People still gather water, people still walk familiar routes, people still greet neighbors, people still hurry to work, people still return home at the end of the day. In that sense, the streets of Pompeii feel less like ruins and more like a paused moment. A city waiting quietly, a city whose footsteps have faded but whose pathways remain. As the afternoon sun climbs higher, shadows shorten across the paving stones. The streets continue their gentle activity. Water flows from fountains. Carts roll through intersections. Voices drift from open doorways. Somewhere nearby, a baker tends an oven. Elsewhere, a merchant arranges goods for customers. Life continues in countless small ways. And as we walk through these preserved streets, following the wheel ruts and crossing the stepping stones, it becomes easier to understand why Pompeii feels so extraordinary. Not because it preserved monuments alone, not because it preserved famous people, but because it preserved movement. The movement of a living city, the paths people followed, the corners where they paused, the fountains where they gathered, the roads they crossed each morning, the streets they knew by heart. The evidence still survives today. Stone beneath sunlight, water beside worn paving, wheel marks carved by time. And as we continue our quiet journey through ancient Pompeii, those streets lead us onward toward another side of city life. For beyond these busy roads and public spaces, hidden behind countless doors, waited the private worlds of home. As we walk through the streets of Pompeii, it is easy to become absorbed in the activity of the city. The fountains, the carts, the conversations drifting from one corner to another, the steady movement of people going about their day. Yet there was another side to Pompeii, a quieter side, a more private side, one that remained hidden behind walls and doorways. From the street, many houses revealed very little. A passerby might see only a plain entrance opening onto a busy road. The exterior wall could appear simple, almost modest. There were few large front windows, few clues about what waited beyond. And then the door would open. What makes this fascinating is that some of Pompeii's most beautiful spaces were almost completely invisible from the outside. The city contained hidden worlds. Worlds of light, worlds of water, worlds of painted walls and shaded gardens, worlds designed not for strangers, but for the people who lived within them. Imagine approaching one of these homes on a warm morning. The street outside is busy. Footsteps echo across stone paving. a merchant calls to a customer. Somewhere nearby, a fountain continues its steady song. You reach the doorway, a step forward. The sounds of the street begin to soften, and suddenly the atmosphere changes. You have entered a Roman home. The first space is often an atrium. For many Romans, this was the heart of the house. The room opens upward toward the sky. Sunlight filters down through a carefully designed opening in the roof. Below sits a shallow basin intended to collect rainwater. The effect is surprisingly peaceful. Light enters from above. Water gathers below. The sounds of the city seem distant now. Imagine standing quietly in such a space. A shaft of sunlight illuminates part of the floor. A gentle breeze drifts through the opening overhead. The air feels cooler than the street outside. Somewhere deeper in the house, you hear faint voices. Perhaps a servant completing a task. Perhaps family members beginning their day. The atrium creates a sense of calm order. This matters because Roman houses were carefully designed environments. They were not merely shelters. They shaped daily experience. They controlled light. They directed movement. They balanced public and private life. And at the center of many homes stood this remarkable combination of sky, water, and architecture. The small pool beneath the roof opening is known today as an impluvium. Rainwater collected here before being stored for household use. Practicality and beauty existed side by side. A useful feature became an elegant focal point. Water shimmered beneath sunlight. Reflections moved across nearby walls. Even ordinary rainfall contributed to the atmosphere of the home. Imagine a gentle storm passing over Pompeii. Outside, water runs through the streets. Inside, drops fall through the roof, opening into the basin below. The sound is soft and rhythmic. A quiet conversation between rain and stone. Over time, countless families would have listened to those sounds. Children growing up within the house. Parents managing daily responsibilities. Grandparents resting nearby. Generations sharing the same space. The result was a home filled not only with objects, but with memories. Beyond the atrium, many houses opened into additional rooms, bedrooms, dining spaces, storage areas, reception rooms, corridors connecting one area to another. Yet perhaps the most remarkable feature often lay farther inside. The garden. Imagine continuing through the house. The rooms gradually open toward a green space at the center. Sunlight fills the area. Plants grow beside pathways. Flowers add color. Small trees cast shifting shadows. Sometimes fountains sparkle quietly among the greenery. Birds may occasionally visit. The garden becomes a world of its own. What makes this so remarkable is that many Roman families created entire landscapes within their homes. Nature was invited indoors. Not wild nature, not untamed forests, but carefully arranged beauty, a place where people could sit, walk, reflect, and escape the noise of the city beyond the walls. It is easy to imagine someone spending part of the afternoon there. The heat of the day has begun to soften. A chair rests beneath a shaded area. Water trickles gently nearby. The scent of flowers drifts through the air. The world beyond the house feels distant. For a little while, there is only sunlight, greenery, and quiet. This reminds us that comfort is not a modern invention. People in Pompeii also sought peaceful places. They also valued beauty. They also enjoyed moments of rest away from work and responsibility. The centuries may separate us, yet many of their desires remain familiar. Not every resident of Pompeii lived in large houses. The city contained enormous variety. Some families enjoyed spacious residences with courtyards and gardens. Others lived in smaller homes. Others occupied rooms above shops. Others rented apartments. Pompeii was not one single experience. It was many experiences existing side by side. Imagine climbing a narrow staircase above a busy street. Below, customers visit nearby businesses. The sounds of trade continue throughout the day. Above, a family occupies a modest apartment. The rooms are smaller, space is limited. Yet daily life unfolds here just as it does elsewhere. Meals are prepared, conversations take place, children sleep, clothing is repaired, plans are made, life continues. This matters because cities are always collections of different lives, the wealthy and the modest, the comfortable and the crowded, the grand house and the simple apartment. Pompeii contained all of them, and together they created the living city we are exploring. As evening approaches, another aspect of domestic life begins to appear. Light. Without electricity, households relied upon lamps. Imagine sunset settling across Pompeii. The last sunlight fades from rooftops. Shadows deepen in courtyards. The city gradually transitions toward night. Inside homes, lamps are prepared. Small clay vessels filled with oil. Simple flames providing warmth and visibility. One lamp illuminates a table, another lights a corridor, a third glows softly beside a household shrine. The result is a very different atmosphere from daylight. The home becomes quieter, more intimate, more reflective. Flickering light moves across painted walls, shadows shift gently, conversations continue in low voices. Outside, the city grows calmer. Inside, family life carries on. Imagine hearing distant footsteps from the street beyond the wall, a dog barking somewhere far away, the faint sound of a fountain continuing its endless flow. Meanwhile, the lamp beside you burns steadily. This is the Pompeii that rarely appears in dramatic retellings. Not the city of catastrophe, not the city of ruins, but the city of evenings, the city of ordinary households, the city of people returning home after long days. Another fascinating feature of many homes was decoration. Roman families often filled their living spaces with color. Today, ancient ruins are frequently imagined as gray stone. Yet Pompeii tells a different story. The city was colorful. Walls were painted, floors were decorated. Artwork appeared throughout private spaces. Red, yellow, black, and white surfaces transformed rooms into places of visual richness. Imagine entering a reception room. The walls glow with deep shades of red. Architectural designs are painted across the surface. Scenes from mythology appear within framed panels. Columns seem to rise where no actual columns exist. The room becomes larger through artistic illusion. The Romans possessed a remarkable talent for creating imagined spaces. Even within enclosed rooms, they found ways to suggest gardens, landscapes, and distant views. What makes this fascinating is that many of these paintings survived because Pompeii itself survived beneath layers of volcanic material. The colors still speak, the artists still speak, the homeowners still speak. Across nearly 2,000 years, their choices remain visible, their tastes, their preferences, their ideas of beauty. The evidence still survives today. And perhaps nowhere is the humanity of Pompeii more visible than inside these homes. Not in grand monuments, not in public speeches, but in everyday spaces. A garden carefully maintained, a lamp lit at dusk, rainwater collected beneath an open roof, a painted wall admired by guests, a meal shared by family, a conversation carried late into the evening. These are the moments that filled most lives. These are the moments that transformed houses into homes. As night settles gently across Pompeii, lamps glow behind countless doorways. The busy streets gradually quiet. Families gather indoors. Gardens rest beneath the stars. The sounds of the city grow softer. And behind walls that reveal almost nothing to the outside world, private lives continue in peaceful rhythm, hidden within the remarkable homes of Pompeii. If there was one thing that connected nearly everyone in Pompeii, it was food. Rich or poor, merchant or laborer, child or grandparent, everyone needed to eat. And so, from the first light of morning until the quiet hours of evening, food shaped the rhythm of daily life throughout the city. To understand Pompeii, it helps to follow a single ordinary day through its meals, not a feast, not a celebration, simply a normal day. Because what makes this fascinating is that ordinary meals often reveal more about a society than its monuments do. A loaf of bread can tell a story. A market stall can tell a story. Even a small bowl of fruit can tell a story. And in Pompeii, many of those stories survived. Imagine the city before sunrise. The streets are still quiet. Most homes remain dark. Yet in several buildings, work has already begun. The bakers are awake. Inside a bakery, lamps flicker against stone walls. Workers move carefully through the dim light. Grain has already been milled. Dough is being prepared. Ovens are warming. The smell of bread slowly begins to fill the air. It is one of the oldest and most comforting smells in human history. Warm grain, yeast, smoke, heat, the promise of a meal to come. In Pompeii, bread was not merely a food, it was a foundation of everyday life. Thousands of loaves were produced throughout the city. Families purchased them daily, workers carried them home, travelers ate them on the road. Children grew up seeing them on tables morning after morning. Imagine stepping inside one of Pompeii's bakeries. The room is warm already. A large stone oven dominates part of the building. Nearby stand enormous millstones. Some still survive today. And they reveal something remarkable. Many bakeries used animal-powered mills. Imagine a donkey walking patiently in circles. Attached to a wooden beam, it slowly turns a large volcanic stone grinder. The movement is steady, unhurried, hour after hour. The grain is crushed between stone surfaces. Flour gradually accumulates. Workers gather it for baking. The process is simple, yet it connects the fields beyond the city with the meals inside thousands of homes. A farmer grows wheat. The grain arrives at the mill. The flour reaches the bakery. The baker produces bread. The bread reaches the table. A chain of ordinary labor linking countless lives together. This reminds us that every loaf carries many invisible stories. Imagine the baker himself. His day begins long before dawn. The city sleeps while he works. He checks the oven, shapes the dough, monitors the heat, adjusts the fire. By the time most residents awaken, the bakery is already alive with activity. Soon customers begin arriving, a woman purchasing bread for her household, a servant sent with instructions, a laborer grabbing food before work begins. The day unfolds through these familiar exchanges. Coins change hands. Greetings are exchanged. Fresh loaves disappear into baskets. And outside, the smell drifts through nearby streets. The evidence still survives today. Archaeologists discovered loaves of bread preserved by the eruption. Some still bear the marks left by bakers nearly 2,000 years ago. The site is strangely moving. A meal interrupted, a day preserved, a simple object transformed into history. Yet bread was only one part of Pompeii's food culture. As the city fully awakens, another world begins to stir. The markets. Imagine walking toward a busy marketplace during the morning hours. The streets grow livelier with every step. Voices mingle in the air. Merchants arrange goods. Customers examine produce. Animals occasionally pass through nearby streets. The atmosphere is active but familiar. This is where the city gathers. Fresh fruits arrive from surrounding farms. Vegetables appear in baskets and crates. Olives, figs, grapes, beans, lentils, nuts, seasonal produce changes throughout the year, creating subtle rhythms that residents learn to recognize. Imagine seeing a display of ripe figs beneath the morning sun. Their color stands out among surrounding goods. Nearby, another merchant offers olives harvested from local groves. A customer pauses. Questions are asked. Prices are discussed. Purchases are made. The scene feels timeless, because in many ways it is. Across centuries and cultures, markets have always been places of conversation as much as commerce. People arrive for food, but they also arrive for news, for social connection, for a sense of community. Pompeii was no different. This matters because food is rarely just food. Meals create routines. Markets create relationships. Shared ingredients create shared experiences. Through food, a city becomes connected. As we continue our walk, another kind of establishment appears along the street. At first glance, it may resemble a small shop. A counter faces the road. Large ceramic containers are built directly into the surface. Customers pause briefly before moving on. These establishments are known today as thermopolia. In many ways, they functioned like ancient food stalls or cafes. For people who did not wish to cook or who lacked extensive kitchen facilities, they offered convenient meals and drinks. Imagine approaching one at midday. The street outside remains busy. Workers pause during their routines. Travelers stop for refreshment. Steam rises gently from prepared foods. The proprietor serves customers one after another. Simple, practical, efficient, and deeply woven into urban life. What makes this fascinating is how familiar the scene feels. The details differ, the clothing differs, the language differs, yet the experience remains recognizable. People grabbing lunch, friends sharing conversation, workers taking a brief break. Life unfolding around food. Inside the ceramic containers might be stews, vegetables, beans, grains, or other prepared dishes. Meals designed to nourish people through the demands of daily life. Nothing extravagant, just ordinary food for ordinary people. And perhaps that is why these places feel so human. Imagine sitting nearby for a while. The sounds of conversation drift through the air. A customer laughs at a joke. Someone discusses business. Another speaks about family matters. The food matters. But the gathering matters too. Throughout history, meals have often served as small pauses within busy days. Moments when work briefly slows. Moments when people reconnect. Moments when life becomes a little gentler. Yet there was another flavor found throughout Pompeii. One that appears again and again in archaeological discoveries. Garum, today, the name may sound unfamiliar, yet for Romans, it was one of the most common condiments in daily life. Garum was a fermented fish sauce used to flavor countless dishes. Its production required patience, its smell was likely quite strong. Its popularity was enormous. Imagine a cook preparing a meal. Vegetables simmer in a pot. Bread rests nearby. A small amount of garum is added. The flavor deepens. The meal changes. For Roman diners, this ingredient appeared so frequently that it became part of the culinary background of life itself. What makes this fascinating is that certain tastes can define entire cultures. Just as different societies today rely on familiar seasonings, the Romans had their own flavor traditions. Garum connected households across the empire, from grand villas to modest kitchens, from bustling cities to distant provinces. The taste was familiar, comforting, expected. Another remarkable ingredient, traveled much farther. Pepper, black pepper, arrived from distant regions through long trade networks stretching across seas and continents. Imagine holding a few peppercorns in your hand. Their journey may have begun thousands of miles away, carried by merchants, loaded onto ships, transferred through ports, sold and resold across the Roman world, eventually arriving in Pompeii. This reminds us how connected the ancient world could be. A resident of Pompeii might never travel beyond Campania, yet ingredients from distant lands could still reach their table. The world was larger than many people imagined, yet trade quietly brought pieces of that world home. As afternoon drifts toward evening, kitchens throughout the city become active once more. Imagine a household preparing its evening meal. The day's work is nearly complete. The heat has begun to soften. Light enters through a courtyard. Someone slices bread. Someone washes vegetables. Someone tends a small fire. The atmosphere feels peaceful, familiar, comfortable. Children may help with simple tasks. Adults discuss the events of the day. The meal slowly comes together. Nothing about the moment seems historically important, and yet this is precisely the kind of moment Pompeii preserved. Not an emperor issuing commands, not a military campaign. A meal, a family, an evening, a loaf of bread resting on a table. As darkness approaches, lamps are lit. Their soft glow fills kitchens and dining spaces. Outside, the streets gradually quiet. Inside, people eat, conversations continue. Plans are made for tomorrow. The city settles into evening, and throughout Pompeii, countless ordinary meals become part of countless ordinary lives. This is Pompeii's quiet miracle. The city preserved evidence of what people ate, how they cooked, where they shopped, what flavors they enjoyed, what routines shaped their days. The result was something remarkably rare, a glimpse not into extraordinary history, but into everyday existence. A bakery before dawn, a market beneath the sun, a thermopolium at midday, a kitchen at dusk, a loaf of bread cooling after baking, the smell of grain and smoke, the sound of conversation over a simple meal. These things may seem small, yet they formed the texture of life itself. And as we leave the ovens, markets, and kitchens behind, another side of Pompeii begins to emerge. For every loaf of bread, every painted room, and every evening meal depended upon the labor of countless workers whose hands kept the city moving from one day to the next. Every morning, long before the city reached its busiest hours, Pompeii was already awake, not because of officials, not because of politicians, not because of wealthy landowners, but because of workers. The city depended upon them. The bread on the table, the water in the fountain, the clean clothing hanging in a household, the repaired roof above a family's head, the pottery in a kitchen, the wine in a cup. All of these things existed because someone rose early, put their hands to a task, and quietly contributed to the life of the city. This matters because cities often appear permanent. Their walls seem solid. Their streets seem fixed. Their buildings appear stable. Yet beneath that appearance lies constant effort. Every day, thousands of small tasks must be completed. Someone must bake. Someone must build. Someone must clean. Someone must transport. Someone must repair. Pompeii was no different. Imagine the city shortly after sunrise. The streets are becoming busier. Shops are opening. Market stalls are preparing for customers. The smell of bread drifts from nearby bakeries. And already, workers are moving through the streets with purpose. A laborer carries tools over one shoulder. A merchant unlocks a storefront. A servant crosses an intersection with a basket. a craftsman begins arranging materials for the day's work. The city is coming alive through labor, not dramatic labor, not heroic labor, simply the kind of work that fills most human lives. And perhaps that is one reason Pompeii feels so familiar. The routines are ancient. The experience is timeless. Imagine returning for a moment to one of the bakeries. The ovens continue burning. Workers move through the warm interior. Flour dust hangs faintly in the air. Fresh loaves are stacked and prepared for sale. The baker's work did not end when the first bread emerged from the oven. There are customers to serve, more dough to prepare, deliveries to organize. The day continues. What makes this fascinating is that many businesses in Pompeii were integrated into the fabric of everyday neighborhoods. Work happened close to home. Commerce existed beside domestic life. The boundaries between personal and professional spaces were often much smaller than many people experience today. A person might live above a shop, sleep only a staircase away from their workplace, begin work within moments of waking. The city itself encouraged this closeness. As we walk farther through Pompeii, another important group of workers appears. The craftsmen. Their skills shaped much of the world around them. Imagine entering a workshop. Sunlight filters through an open doorway. Tools rest neatly along a wall. Materials await transformation. A craftsman bends over his work with practiced concentration. Perhaps he shapes metal. Perhaps he works with wood. Perhaps he repairs household items. Perhaps he creates objects destined for homes, shops, or temples. The specific trade matters less than the rhythm itself. Skill developed over years. Repetition refined through experience. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next. This reminds us that many ancient objects survived because someone cared enough to make them well. The lamp illuminating a room, the bowl holding a meal, the lock securing a door, the hinge allowing a gate to swing open. These objects often disappear into the background of daily life, yet each began in the hands of a worker. Each required time, effort, patience. As the morning progresses, movement increases throughout the city. Goods must travel from place to place, and so another important participant in urban life appears: the animal. Pompeii was not a city of engines, it was a city of muscle. Human muscle, animal muscle, the physical effort of living and working. Imagine a donkey moving steadily along a street. Its pace is unhurried. Its task is familiar. Attached to a cart, it carries supplies needed elsewhere in the city. The wheels follow grooves worn into the paving stones by countless journeys before. The driver guides the animal with quiet experience. Neither seems hurried. The work simply continues. Day after day. Year after year. What makes this fascinating is how much of urban life depended upon such ordinary partnerships between humans and animals. Donkeys carried goods. Mules transported materials. Animals powered mills. They connected farms, workshops, markets, and households. Without them, the city's rhythm would have slowed considerably. Imagine standing aside as a cart passes. The sound of wooden wheels briefly fills the street. Hooves strike stone. Then gradually the sounds fade into the distance. The moment lasts only seconds. Yet thousands of similar moments filled every day in Pompeii. Another group of workers occupied a particularly important place within Roman society: the laundry workers. At first, this may not sound especially remarkable, yet clean clothing mattered greatly in Roman life, and maintaining those garments required considerable effort. Imagine entering a Falonica, the Roman laundry workshop. Large basins occupy part of the building. Workers move among them. Garments are cleaned, treated, and prepared for use. The process could be demanding and sometimes unpleasant, yet the results were valuable. Freshly cleaned clothing represented respectability, appearance, and social standing. A toga worn by a public figure, a tunic worn by a merchant, a garment prepared for a family gathering, all depended upon labor performed behind the scenes. This matters because every city contains invisible work, tasks that many people notice only when they are absent. Water delivery, cleaning, repairs, maintenance. The Romans relied upon these services just as modern cities do. And the workers who performed them helped create the daily comfort that others often took for granted. Beyond the workshops and businesses, construction workers also shaped the appearance of Pompeii. The city was constantly changing. Walls required repairs. Buildings needed maintenance. New structures appeared. Older structures were improved. Imagine hearing the sound of hammering somewhere nearby. A scaffold stands against a wall. Workers move materials upward. Dust catches the sunlight. The project may seem ordinary, yet together, thousands of such projects gradually transformed the city over time. No city remains frozen, not even an ancient one. Pompeii was alive, and living cities constantly evolve. Around midday, many workers pause briefly. The heat of the day becomes more noticeable. A meal provides welcome rest. Imagine sitting beneath a shaded area near a workshop. The sounds of labor soften for a while. Bread is shared. Water is consumed. Simple food restores energy. Conversations drift from one topic to another. Perhaps someone discusses business. Perhaps someone comments on the weather. Perhaps someone speaks about family matters waiting at home. For a short time, work gives way to companionship. These pauses matter. Because labor is only one part of life, workers were not merely workers. They were parents, children, friends, neighbors, members of households and communities. The city relied upon their labor, but their identities extended beyond it. As afternoon arrives, activity resumes. Merchants continue trading, craftsmen continue creating, animals continue hauling, repairs continue progressing. The city keeps moving. Imagine following a traveler entering Pompeii for the first time. Dust from the road still clings to his clothing. He guides an animal carrying goods intended for sale. The city unfolds before him. The streets, the fountains, the shops, the crowds. Travelers like this helped connect Pompeii to the wider Roman world. Some arrived from nearby settlements. Others journeyed greater distances. They brought products, information, stories, ideas. In this way, the working city was never entirely isolated. Roads carried more than goods. They carried connections. What makes this fascinating is that every worker contributed to a larger system without necessarily seeing the entire picture. A baker might never meet the farmer who grew his grain. A customer might never meet the craftsman who created a household tool. A merchant might never know the sailor who helped transport imported goods across distant waters. Yet, all were connected. The city functioned because thousands of individual efforts overlapped and supported one another. This reminds us of something remarkably human. Most societies are built not by a few famous individuals, but by countless ordinary people performing ordinary tasks. Tasks repeated so often they seem almost invisible, and yet without them, everything stops. As evening approaches, the pace gradually softens. The sunlight grows warmer. Shadows lengthen across the streets. Businesses begin closing. Tools are put away. Deliveries conclude. Animals return to resting places. The working day slowly comes to an end. Imagine a craftsman locking his workshop, a baker preparing for tomorrow's work, a laborer walking home through familiar streets. The sounds of the city begin to change. Less hammering, less movement, more conversation, more footsteps returning toward homes and courtyards, more lamps appearing behind doorways. The city exhales. For a little while, the work is finished. Tomorrow, it will begin again. The ovens will be lit. The carts will roll. The workshops will open. The markets will fill. The city will once again depend upon thousands of hands performing thousands of tasks. And perhaps that is Pompeii's quiet lesson. The greatness of a city is not found only in its monuments. It is found in its workers, in the baker rising before dawn, in the craftsman shaping useful objects, in the laundry worker cleaning garments, in the traveler arriving with goods, in the animal patiently pulling a cart through the streets. Their names are mostly forgotten. Their stories were rarely written down. Yet their labor still echoes through the preserved streets of Pompeii. And as we continue our journey through this remarkable city, we will soon encounter another group of voices that survived in a surprisingly direct way. Not through statues, not through official records, but through messages scratched onto walls by ordinary people who never imagined anyone would still be reading them nearly 2,000 years later. As we have wandered through the streets of Pompeii, visited its homes, followed its workers, and shared in its daily routines, one question quietly lingers. Who were these people? Not the emperors, not the governors, not the famous generals whose names fill history books. The ordinary people, the baker who rose before dawn, the merchant arranging goods in a market, the child running an errand through a busy street, the traveler stopping for a meal, the neighbor pausing beside a fountain. History often struggles to preserve such voices. The powerful leave monuments, the wealthy leave records, the famous leave stories. Ordinary people usually leave very little behind. Yet Pompeii is different, and what makes this fascinating is that some of the most personal voices in the ancient world survived in the simplest possible way. They were written on walls. Imagine walking down a street in Pompeii. The sun is warm above. Shops open onto the road. People move around you. At first glance, the walls appear ordinary. Then you notice marks scratched into the plaster. A name, a message, a joke, a greeting, a complaint, a declaration of affection. Suddenly the city feels closer. The people become individuals. Across nearly 2,000 years, they begin speaking again. Today, we call these writings graffiti. The word often carries negative associations in the modern world. Yet in Pompeii, graffiti formed part of everyday urban life. People wrote messages almost everywhere. On walls, near doorways, beside public spaces. Sometimes quickly, sometimes carefully, sometimes playfully, sometimes thoughtfully. The result was an enormous collection of human voices preserved by chance. Imagine someone standing beside a wall one afternoon. Perhaps they are waiting for a friend. Perhaps business is slow. Perhaps they simply feel inspired to leave a thought behind. A few scratches in wet plaster. A brief message. Nothing more. Certainly nothing intended for readers 2 millennia later. And yet, here we are, still listening. One of the most common subjects was love. This should not surprise us. Human beings have been writing about love for as long as they have been writing at all. Imagine a young resident of Pompeii. A certain person occupies their thoughts. Perhaps they recently exchanged a conversation. Perhaps they exchanged a smile. Perhaps they hope for something more. The feelings are difficult to ignore. And so a message appears on a wall. Simple, direct, personal, the exact names may vary, the centuries may pass, yet the emotion remains recognizable. This reminds us that some experiences never truly disappear from human life. People still fall in love. People still daydream. People still leave messages hoping someone will notice. Pompeii preserved those moments, not because anyone intended to preserve them, but because history sometimes protects the unexpected. Alongside declarations of affection came humor. The people of Pompeii enjoyed jokes. They enjoyed teasing. They enjoyed playful comments. Imagine hearing laughter outside a shop. Friends exchange stories. Someone makes a clever remark. The moment passes. Usually such moments vanish forever. Yet occasionally they found their way onto a wall. A brief joke, a humorous observation, a playful insult, a small attempt to make someone smile. What makes this fascinating is how familiar these messages feel. The language belongs to another era. The culture differs. The world itself has changed, yet the impulse remains recognizable. People enjoy making one another laugh. They always have. As we continue walking, another category of writing begins to appear. Names, so many names. Some are carefully written, others are scratched quickly into plaster. Imagine seeing one now, a single name standing quietly on a wall. Nothing more. No explanation, no biography, no grand achievement. Just a person announcing their existence. Perhaps they wish to be remembered. Perhaps they simply wanted to leave a mark. Perhaps they were passing time. We cannot always know. And that mystery creates a curious kind of connection. For a moment, a stranger from the ancient world feels surprisingly close. You see their name. They once stood where you stand. They looked at the same wall. They left a trace. The evidence still survives today. This matters because history often focuses on extraordinary individuals. Pompeii reminds us that ordinary individuals mattered too. The city preserved not only famous stories, but countless small ones. Small stories written by people who expected no audience beyond their own generation. Some graffiti reveal everyday business activities, accounts, transactions, notes, practical information connected to commerce and daily life. Imagine a merchant reviewing figures after a busy day. Sales must be tracked. Goods must be counted. Debts must be remembered. The city operated through thousands of small economic relationships. Sometimes traces of those relationships survived in writing. The result is a more complete picture of Pompeii. Not simply a city of beautiful houses and painted walls. Not simply a city of temples and markets. But a functioning community filled with ordinary responsibilities, bills, deliveries, purchases, promises, all the small details that quietly support daily life. Yet perhaps the most moving graffiti are often the simplest. A greeting, a brief message, a personal remark. Nothing dramatic, nothing historic, just evidence that someone was there. Imagine walking through Pompeii during a quiet afternoon. The streets are warm. The fountain water glimmers in the sunlight. A breeze drifts through an intersection. You pause beside a wall. A message remains visible. The writer has been gone for nearly 2,000 years. Their home may have vanished. Their family may be forgotten. Their possessions may have disappeared. Yet their words remain. A few scratches in plaster, a voice reaching across centuries. There is something deeply human about this. We often imagine the ancient world as distant and silent. Pompeii refuses to remain silent. The city speaks constantly, through houses, through tools, through through food, through artwork, and perhaps most directly through these written messages. The people themselves continue talking, not through official speeches, not through carefully preserved literature, but through casual remarks left in everyday places. This reminds us that ordinary people rarely believe they are creating history. The person scratching a note onto a wall probably expected it to disappear within a few years. Rain, repairs, time, something would eventually erase it. Instead, history preserved it. And because of that, a remarkable thing happened. The writer survived, not physically, not completely, but a small part of them survived. A thought, a joke, a name, an emotion, a moment of self-expression. Across the centuries, that is sometimes enough. Imagine evening approaching in Pompeii. The heat begins to fade. Merchants close their shops. Workers return home. Children disappear indoors. Lamps are prepared for the coming darkness. The walls remain where they have always stood, covered with messages, covered with traces of lives, covered with evidence that this city was not an abstract historical site. It was a community, a place filled with personalities, some serious, some humorous, some romantic, some practical, some thoughtful, some impulsive. Very much like any community today, what makes Pompeii so remarkable is not simply that buildings survived. It is that people survived in unexpected ways. A baker survives through preserved bread. An artist survives through painted walls. A homeowner survives through a garden. And countless ordinary residents survive through words. Words they never imagined would outlive them. Words still visible after nearly 2,000 years. Words that allow us to hear ancient voices speaking softly from stone and plaster. As we leave these streets and their remarkable messages behind, another aspect of Pompeii's daily life begins to emerge. For alongside work, food, friendship, and conversation stood something equally important to the people of the city. Belief, the quiet presence of gods, rituals, shrines, and sacred spaces woven into the rhythm of everyday life. As we continue our gentle journey through Pompeii, let us leave behind the bakeries, workshops, and busy market corners for a little while and enter a quieter part of the city. Not quieter because fewer people lived there, quieter because it belonged to another side of life. The side that could not be weighed on scales or counted in coins. The side that dealt with hope, gratitude, memory, protection, and the mysteries of the world. For the people of Pompeii, religion was not separated from daily life. It was woven into it. A prayer might begin the morning. A small offering might accompany a meal. A lamp might be lit before a household shrine. A traveler setting out through the city gates might whisper a few words to a protective deity before beginning the journey. Faith was not something reserved for special occasions. It lived beside ordinary routines. It accompanied people through every stage of life, and because of this, traces of belief appeared almost everywhere, in grand temples, in modest homes, at street corners, in gardens, in workshops, even in places where modern visitors might least expect to find them. Imagine walking through Pompeii just after sunrise. The stone streets are beginning to warm beneath the growing light. Water splashes softly from public fountains. Shopkeepers prepare their stalls. A donkey cart rattles slowly across the paving stones. Yet before many people begin their work, there is often a small moment of devotion. Perhaps only a few seconds. Perhaps a quiet gesture. A simple acknowledgement of forces larger than themselves. The world of ancient Rome was filled with gods. Not one god, not two, but many, each connected to different aspects of existence. Some protected households, others watched over commerce. Some governed the sea, others were associated with agriculture, love, wisdom, or fortune. What makes this fascinating is that religion in Pompeii was remarkably practical. People did not necessarily separate sacred concerns from everyday concerns. A merchant might pray for successful trade. A sailor might ask for calm waters. A farmer might seek favorable weather. A parent might request protection for a child. The result was a religious landscape that felt deeply human. The gods were not distant figures living beyond imagination. They were woven into daily experience, and nowhere was this more visible than inside the homes of Pompeii. If we step through the doorway of a typical house and leave the noise of the street behind, we often find evidence of a small household shrine. The Romans called these shrines lararia. They varied greatly in size. Some were simple niches built into a wall. Others were beautifully decorated structures painted with bright colors. Yet their purpose remained much the same. They honored protective household spirits. Imagine standing in the cool shade of an atrium. Rainwater rests quietly within the shallow pool at its center. Light enters from the open roof above. Nearby, against a wall, stands a painted shrine. Perhaps small figurines rest within it. Perhaps a tiny oil lamp burns softly. Perhaps traces of incense drift through the air. Every day, family members might pause here. A prayer, an offering, a brief moment of gratitude. Then the routines of life would continue. Meals would be prepared. Children would study. Visitors would arrive. Business would be conducted. Yet the shrine remained quietly present, watching over everything. This matters because these small spaces reveal something intimate about Pompeii. They show us religion not as a grand public ceremony, but as part of family life. The evidence still survives today. Many household shrines remain visible within excavated homes. Their painted decorations often include snakes gliding across the walls. To Roman eyes, these images carried positive meanings associated with protection and prosperity. Imagine a child growing up in such a house. The shrine would always have been there, part of the familiar landscape of daily life, as ordinary as the courtyard, as familiar as the dining room, as constant as the sound of water in a nearby fountain. Beyond the homes, sacred spaces also appeared throughout the streets themselves. Pompeii was a city where religion could be encountered almost anywhere. Small altars sometimes stood at intersections. Images of gods appeared on walls. Public monuments reminded residents of the divine forces believed to influence the world around them. Picture an evening walk through the city. The sunlight begins to soften. Long shadows stretch across the paving stones. The voices of merchants gradually fade. A shrine appears at a corner. Someone pauses briefly. A few quiet words are spoken. Then the person continues on their way. No great ceremony, no crowd, just another small moment woven into the rhythm of life. Over time, thousands upon thousands of such moments shaped the spiritual atmosphere of the city. Yet there was another side to this story. Alongside these intimate household practices stood the great public temples of Pompeii. These buildings rose above the surrounding streets. They were visible reminders of civic religion, places where community identity and spiritual life came together. One of the most important stood within the city's forum. The forum was the heart of Pompeii, a place of politics, commerce, conversation, and public life. And overlooking this central space stood temples dedicated to powerful Roman deities. Imagine approaching the forum during a festival day. Citizens gather beneath the warm Campanian sky. Official ceremonies are prepared. Priests move through the crowds. Incense rises slowly into the air. Musicians perform nearby. The atmosphere feels both sacred and communal. Religion here was not only personal, it was shared. It connected individuals to the larger life of the city. This reminds us that Pompeii was not merely a collection of houses. It was a community. And communities often express their values through collective rituals. The temples provided spaces where that could happen. Among these sacred buildings, one in particular continues to capture the imagination of historians and visitors alike. The Temple of Isis. Today it remains one of Pompeii's most fascinating religious sites. Its story begins far from Italy, far beyond the Bay of Naples, far beyond the Roman countryside. Its roots lay in Egypt. The goddess Isis had been worshipped for centuries before Pompeii even existed. Her cult spread across the Mediterranean world. Over time, her followers appeared in many Roman cities. Pompeii became one of them. What makes this remarkable is the distance involved. Ancient ships crossed seas carrying goods, ideas, beliefs, and traditions. The Temple of Isis reminds us how connected the ancient world could be. A person living in Pompeii might never visit Egypt, yet Egyptian religious traditions could still become part of everyday life. Imagine entering the temple. The sounds of the city seem to fade behind you. Columns surround the courtyard. Sacred objects occupy carefully arranged spaces. Offerings rest upon altars. Perhaps incense burns nearby. Perhaps music accompanies a ritual. The air feels different, not necessarily mysterious, simply set apart. A place intended for reflection and devotion. The worship of Isis attracted many followers, particularly those seeking a personal connection with the divine. Religious ceremonies associated with Isis often emphasized participation and spiritual experience. For some residents of Pompeii, this offered something deeply meaningful. The temple became one of the city's most cherished sacred places. Its preservation today allows us to glimpse a religious tradition that traveled vast distances before finding a home beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. And once again, we see how Pompeii connected local life with the wider world. The city was not isolated. Ships arrived constantly. Ideas moved with them. Religions traveled too. Beyond the Temple of Isis, many other sacred spaces contributed to the spiritual landscape of Pompeii. Temples dedicated to Jupiter, Apollo, Venus, and other deities formed part of everyday experience. Each possessed its own traditions, its own festivals, its own role within civic life. Imagine one of those festival days. Colorful garments move through crowded streets. Offerings are prepared. Neighbors gather together. Musicians play gentle melodies. Children watch the proceedings with curiosity. Food is shared. Conversations continue. Religious celebrations often blended sacred and social experiences. People came together not only to honor the gods, but also to participate in community life. This matters because modern people sometimes imagine ancient religion as distant or severe. Yet many ceremonies likely felt familiar in certain ways. Families gathered, friends met, communities celebrated. The setting was different, the beliefs were different, but the human desire for connection remains recognizable. As evening approaches, let us slow our pace once more. Picture Pompeii beneath the golden light of sunset. The streets begin to quiet. Shadows stretch across painted walls. Smoke rises gently from household hearths. Somewhere a lamp is being lit before a family shrine. Elsewhere, a final offering is placed before a sacred image. The sounds of the day gradually soften. Religion, in that sense, accompanied the city from morning until night. It stood beside work, beside meals, beside celebrations, beside worries, beside hopes. And perhaps that is why the sacred spaces of Pompeii still feel so alive today. Not because they tell us only about gods, but because they tell us about people. People seeking protection, people expressing gratitude, people looking for meaning in a complicated world. The temples, shrines, and sacred streets preserved beneath volcanic ash remind us of something timeless. Across centuries and civilizations, people have often paused amid the busyness of life to look beyond themselves, to offer thanks, to seek comfort, to mark important moments, and to wonder about the unseen forces that shape the world around them. The evidence still survives today. Painted shrines, temple walls, altars worn smooth by time, quiet traces of faith left behind by ordinary residents of Pompeii. Their voices may have faded, their prayers may no longer be heard, yet the spaces they created remain, waiting patiently beneath the Italian sky. A remarkable reminder of how people once lived and how they once believed. Behind the doors of Pompeii, another world was waiting, a world of color, a world of gardens painted on walls, a world of red rooms, golden borders, delicate birds, quiet fountains, and distant landscapes that existed only in pigment and imagination. The people of Pompeii did not leave their walls empty. They filled them with stories, with beauty, with dreams. Imagine stepping into a Roman house after walking through the bright stone street outside. The doorway is narrow, the air becomes cooler, the sound of carts and footsteps begins to fade behind you. Then, as your eyes adjust, the walls seem to open, not physically, but visually. A room that might have been small becomes spacious through painting. A plain surface becomes a garden. A dining room becomes a theater of color. A wall becomes a window into another place. This is one of the most beautiful gifts of ancient Pompeii. Its painted rooms still allow us to see how people surrounded themselves with imagination. Many Pompeian homes were decorated with frescoes. A fresco was not simply paint placed on a dry wall. It was often painted onto wet plaster, so that color became part of the surface itself. The result could endure for centuries, and in Pompeii, because so much was sealed beneath ash, these colors survived with unusual freshness. Soft blues, deep blacks, warm yellows, bright greens, and perhaps most famously, a rich red that seems to glow even today, Pompeian red. It appears across many walls like the warmth of a low evening fire. Imagine a room lined with that color. A couch arranged for reclining. A small table set nearby. A lamp waiting to be lit. The red walls do not shout. They surround. They give the room a sense of warmth and ceremony. They make daily life feel slightly more beautiful than it might have felt otherwise. What makes this fascinating is that painted decoration was not only about luxury, it was also about atmosphere. A house could create a mood. A dining room might feel elegant. A courtyard might feel like a sacred garden. A bedroom might feel quiet and private. A reception room might impress visitors. In that sense, Pompeian painting was not just art on a wall. It was part of how people lived. It shaped how a person felt when entering a room. It helped turn a house into a world. Some walls were painted to imitate architecture. Columns, doorways, balconies, windows, painted frames opened into imaginary spaces. A visitor might see a false doorway leading into a landscape that did not exist. or painted columns that seemed to support a ceiling they did not truly hold. These illusions gently expanded the room. They made the eye wander. They invited the mind to travel. Imagine sitting at dinner as daylight fades. The room grows dim. Oil lamps begin to glow. On the walls around you, painted architecture catches the flickering light. A painted column seems almost real. A distant painted building seems to rest beneath a painted sky. Conversation continues softly. Wine is poured. Bread is broken. And all around, the house becomes larger than its physical walls. This matters because many Pompeian homes were not enormous. Even wealthy houses had rooms that depended on clever design for atmosphere. Painting allowed people to create depth, beauty, and status in limited space. It was a way of bringing the wider world indoors. The walls could show mythological scenes, landscapes, gardens, animals, theater masks, still life arrangements, gods and heroes. Each image added another layer to the emotional life of the home. Some paintings told stories from myth. These scenes connected Pompeian households to the great traditions of the Greek and Roman world. A visitor might recognize a god, a hero, a tragic figure, or a familiar tale. The painting could become a quiet conversation piece. It could show education, taste, cultural memory. But we do not need to imagine these rooms as serious classrooms. They were lived in. People passed through them carrying baskets. Children may have played nearby. Servants swept the floors. Guests reclined at meals. The painted gods and heroes watched over ordinary human routines. And that is part of their charm. The extraordinary lived beside the everyday. In one room, a mythic scene might unfold on the wall. In the same room, someone might be asking for more bread. Over time, these painted stories became part of the household. Familiar faces, familiar colors, familiar scenes. They were not visited once and forgotten. They surrounded daily life. Other paintings were gentler. They showed gardens, birds, fruit, fountains, leaves, flowers. These painted gardens are among the most peaceful images preserved from Pompeii. They remind us how much the Romans loved cultivated nature. A real garden might stand in the courtyard. But even where space was limited, a painted garden could create a feeling of greenery and air. Imagine a wall covered with delicate plants. Small birds rest among branches. A low fence appears in the distance. A fountain seems to sparkle in the painted light. Perhaps a painted sky opens above it all. The viewer is still indoors, yet the room feels touched by the outside world. It is easy to imagine someone resting there in the heat of the afternoon. The streets outside are bright and busy, but inside, the painted garden offers shade for the mind. A cool illusion, a quiet retreat, a little paradise made from plaster and color. The result was both decorative and emotional. Painted nature softened the boundaries of the home. It allowed people to live surrounded by reminders of growth, abundance, and beauty. This reminds us that Pompeii was not only practical, it was imaginative. Its people cared about surfaces, colors, moods, the feeling of a room, the pleasure of looking. Floors also carried beauty. Many houses contained mosaics. A mosaic was made from tiny pieces of stone, glass, or ceramic, arranged carefully to form patterns or images. Some were simple, others were astonishingly detailed. The floor beneath a person's feet could become a work of art. Imagine entering a house and seeing a mosaic at the threshold. Perhaps it shows a dog, perhaps a greeting, perhaps a geometric pattern made from thousands of small pieces. The image lies flat beneath you, yet it speaks immediately. It welcomes. It warns. It decorates. It tells you something about the household before a word is spoken. Inside richer homes, mosaics could become even more elaborate. Scenes of sea creatures, theater masks, animals, mythological figures. Intricate borders surrounding rooms like woven carpets made of stone. There is something quietly moving about this. A person walked across these floors every day. Sandals touched the same patterns. Guests admired them. Servants cleaned them. Children learned their shapes. And then, centuries later, archaeologists uncovered them again. The same tiny stones still holding their places. The same images still waiting. Portraits also belong to the visual world of Pompeii. Some painted faces survive with a striking sense of presence. Not always formal, not always idealized. Sometimes they feel close to us. A couple holding writing tablets, a young woman with thoughtful eyes, a figure shown with the tools of learning and refinement. These portraits remind us that the people of Pompeii wanted to be seen, not only by neighbors, perhaps also by time. Imagine standing before such a painting today. The person is gone, the room is silent, the household has vanished, yet the painted face remains, calm, composed, almost listening. What makes this fascinating is that art in Pompeii does not only show wealth or fashion, it preserves personality, or at least the wish for personality. It shows how people presented themselves, how they wanted a room to feel, how they wished guests to understand them. A painted wall could say, "This household is cultured." A garden scene could say, "This house is peaceful." A mythological panel could say, "These people know the great stories." A mosaic could say, "Beauty begins at the doorway." And perhaps that is why the painted homes of Pompeii feel so intimate. They are not only ruins, they are arrangements of taste. Choices made by real people. Someone chose that red. Someone paid for that border. Someone approved that garden. Someone walked through the room when the plaster was still new and saw the colors shining for the first time. Let us imagine one of those moments. A painter stands on a small wooden platform. The plaster is fresh. Pigments are prepared in small containers. A brush moves carefully across the wall. Lines become columns. Leaves become vines. A bird appears on a branch. The room slowly changes. Others may pass by and watch. Perhaps the house owner pauses for a moment. Perhaps a servant carries water through the room. Outside, the street continues as always, but inside, a wall is becoming a dream. Over time, Pompeian painting developed many styles. Some walls imitated marble. Some created architectural illusions. Some opened into imaginary landscapes. Some placed mythological scenes like framed pictures against fields of color. The details changed. Fashion changed. Taste changed. But the desire remained constant. To make indoor life richer. To turn plaster into atmosphere. To surround the body with color and the mind with images. This is one reason Pompeii is so valuable to history. In many ancient places, color has disappeared. Stone temples now appear pale. Statues have lost their paint. Walls have faded. But Pompeii reminds us that the ancient world was not plain white marble. It was colorful, sometimes intensely colorful. It was painted, polished, patterned, and bright. The past, when seen through Pompeii, becomes warmer, more textured, more alive. Picture again a quiet room in the late afternoon. The sunlight enters from the courtyard. A painted wall glows softly. A mosaic floor feels cool beneath the feet. A small fountain murmurs nearby. In the painted garden, birds remain forever still among painted leaves. The room is not grand in the modern sense. It is not filled with machines or electric light. Yet it has its own richness, a richness made from pigment, stone, water, air, and careful human attention. And perhaps this is the gentle secret of Pompeii's painted dreams. They show us that beauty was part of ordinary life. Not always for everyone in equal measure, not always in the same form. But throughout the city, people sought color. They sought decoration. They sought the pleasure of making a place feel loved. Even now, when visitors walk through Pompeii, they often pause before painted walls, not because they are trying to memorize facts, but because something in those rooms still works. The illusion still opens. The red still glows. The gardens still feel cool. The small birds still rest among leaves. The walls still invite the imagination to wander. And in that quiet wandering, the ancient city returns for a moment, not as a disaster, not as an archaeological site, but as a place where people woke in the morning, stepped across mosaic floors, past painted walls, and lived among colors they had chosen for comfort, pride, memory, and delight. Pompeii, in this way, preserved more than buildings. It preserved atmosphere. It preserved the feeling of rooms, the softness of painted gardens, the glow of red walls, the careful beauty of a threshold mosaic. And as we leave these painted dreams behind, we carry with us a gentle reminder. The people of Pompeii did not know they were creating a gift for the future. They were simply making their homes beautiful. One wall, one floor, one quiet room at a time. As the day unfolds in Pompeii and the morning work begins to give way to the gentler rhythms of afternoon, it is time for us to explore another side of the city. Not the side of business, not the side of religion, not the side of household responsibilities, but the moments in between, the hours people devoted to relaxation, conversation, recreation, and simple enjoyment. For the residents of Pompeii, life was not spent entirely at work. There were places to gather, places to exercise, places to watch performances, places to meet friends, places to exchange news, places simply to pass the time. And among all these places, none may have been more important than the baths. Today, when we hear the word bath, we often imagine a private room, a quiet space, a few moments alone. For the Romans, however, public baths were something very different. They were among the most social places in the city. They combined cleanliness, relaxation, exercise, conversation, and community life into a single experience. Imagine approaching one of Pompeii's bath complexes in the late afternoon. The sun hangs warmly above the rooftops. The streets remain lively. People move steadily through the city. Some carry baskets. Others lead animals. Children run ahead of their parents. And among them are men and women making their way toward the baths. Not because they are dirty, but because this is simply part of daily life, much as one might visit a cafe or meet friends in a public square. The bathhouse stands waiting. Its walls are familiar, its entrance welcoming. Inside, the atmosphere changes. The noise of the street softens. Stone floors remain pleasantly cool beneath the feet. Voices echo gently through large chambers. The scent of oil lingers in the air. Water is never far away. What makes this fascinating is that bathing followed a sequence. Visitors did not simply enter a pool. They moved gradually through different rooms, each space offering a different experience. Imagine beginning in a changing room. Clothing is carefully set aside. Conversations drift through the chamber. Friends greet one another. News is exchanged. Perhaps a recent shipment has arrived at the harbor. Perhaps someone discusses a local election. Perhaps a baker shares thoughts about tomorrow's business. The topics vary, the social rhythm remains constant. The baths were places where information moved through the city. A person could arrive knowing little of the day's events and leave having heard dozens of stories. In that sense, the baths served almost as an informal network connecting the community. From the changing room, visitors often moved into warmer areas. The air becomes softer. The walls begin to hold heat. Steam drifts quietly through the chambers. Light enters through high windows, creating gentle beams that glow through the mist. Imagine standing there. The warmth settles into your muscles. The noise remains calm. Water splashes softly nearby. The atmosphere encourages people to slow down. This matters because life in Pompeii could be physically demanding. Many residents worked long hours. They walked considerable distances. They lifted, carried, built, harvested, baked, and traded. The baths provided a daily opportunity to rest, to recover, to pause, to feel comfortable. And comfort, as we know, is something people have always valued. Further inside, heated pools invite visitors to relax. The Romans became remarkably skilled at creating these environments. Beneath some floors, hidden systems circulated heat through the buildings. Warm air moved beneath raised flooring and through hollow spaces in the walls. The result was an interior climate carefully managed through engineering and design. Yet, for the person sitting quietly beside the water, the experience likely felt simple. Pleasant warmth. Friendly conversation. A brief escape from responsibility. The technology remained mostly invisible. The comfort was immediate. Imagine a group of friends reclining near the warm pool. Their discussion drifts between practical matters and idle observations. Someone comments on the weather. Another mentions a vineyard outside the city. A third recalls a recent performance at the theater. Nothing particularly important, nothing especially urgent, just ordinary conversation, the kind that fills communities everywhere. And perhaps that is why the baths feel so familiar to us. Though separated by centuries, the human experience remains recognizable. People sought company. People sought comfort. People sought moments of ease. Over time, the baths became one of the defining features of Roman urban life. Pompeii contained several bath complexes, each serving different parts of the city. Some were older, some more elaborate, some catered to larger crowds. Yet all shared a similar purpose. They brought people together, and they helped transform a city of individuals into a community. Yet bathing was only one part of leisure in Pompeii. The city also enjoyed entertainment in many forms. Beyond the baths stood theaters where audiences gathered to watch performances. Imagine approaching one of these venues as evening approaches. The heat of the day begins to fade. Shadows lengthen across the streets. Groups of people move in the same direction. Families, friends, neighbors, all making their way toward a shared experience. The theater itself rises from the landscape. Rows of seats curve gracefully around the performance area. Stone architecture frames the scene. The audience settles gradually into place. The atmosphere is lively, but not chaotic, expectant, but relaxed. A performance begins. Perhaps it is a comedy, perhaps a musical presentation, perhaps a dramatic story drawn from familiar traditions. Laughter occasionally ripples through the audience. Applause follows certain moments. The performance unfolds beneath the open sky. Imagine sitting there among hundreds of fellow residents. A warm evening breeze drifts through the seating area. The sounds of the city feel distant. For a little while, daily concerns fade into the background. Stories take their place. This reminds us that entertainment has long been part of human life. People enjoy narratives. They enjoy music. They enjoy gathering together for shared experiences. The residents of Pompeii were no different. The theater offered a place where imagination could flourish, a place where performers and audiences met within the same temporary world. Nearby stood another venue dedicated to public entertainment, the amphitheater. Today it remains one of Pompeii's most famous structures. Remarkably, it is among the oldest surviving Roman amphitheaters known. Imagine approaching it on an event day. The building rises confidently above the surrounding area. Crowds arrive from different neighborhoods. Vendors set up nearby. Conversations fill the air. The atmosphere resembles a major community gathering. Inside, thousands of spectators can find places to sit. From above, the structure appears almost like a giant bowl carved into the landscape. Rows upon rows of seating surround the central arena. What makes this fascinating is not merely the scale of the building. It is what the building tells us about the city itself. Constructing such a venue required resources, planning, and public interest. The people of Pompeii valued communal experiences enough to create spaces capable of holding enormous crowds. Today, when we stand within the amphitheater, the silence can feel striking. Birds move overhead, grass grows between ancient stones, the crowds have long since disappeared. Yet, it is easy to imagine the building during its active years. The movement of people, the conversations, the anticipation, the simple excitement of gathering together. Beyond formal entertainment venues, leisure appeared throughout daily life in smaller ways as well. People visited gardens. They attended banquets. They strolled through public spaces. They met friends in courtyards and porticos. Not every enjoyable moment required a special event. Sometimes leisure was simply a conversation beneath a shaded walkway. Sometimes it was an evening meal shared with family. Sometimes it was sitting quietly in a garden while water flowed through a nearby fountain. Imagine one of Pompeii's private gardens as the sun begins to descend toward the horizon. Flowers sway gently in the evening breeze. Birdsong drifts through the air. A fountain murmurs steadily. Guests arrive for dinner. Oil lamps are prepared for later. The atmosphere feels unhurried, comfortable. The meal itself may last for hours. Courses arrive gradually. Conversation moves naturally from topic to topic. Stories are shared, jokes are exchanged, news travels from one guest to another. The food matters, but the companionship matters just as much. This matters because leisure in Pompeii was rarely about isolation. It was often social. Experiences gained meaning through shared participation. People relaxed together, celebrated together, gathered together. Community remained at the center of daily life. As evening deepens, lamps begin to glow throughout the city. The baths gradually empty. The theaters conclude their performances. Families return home. The streets grow quieter, yet traces of the day's leisure linger. Conversations continue over late meals. Children recount what they have seen. Neighbors exchange final greetings before nightfall. The city settles into a slower rhythm, and perhaps nowhere is the character of Pompeii more visible than in these moments. Not during great political events, not during official ceremonies, but during ordinary hours of relaxation. A warm bath, a shared meal, a performance beneath the evening sky, a stroll through familiar streets, a conversation among friends. These simple experiences rarely appear in history books, yet they formed the texture of daily life. They filled the spaces between major events. They gave shape to human happiness. And because Pompeii preserved so much of its world, we can still glimpse those moments today. The bathhouses remain. The theaters remain. The amphitheater remains. Their stones continue to tell quiet stories. Stories not of conquest or empire, but of people seeking comfort, companionship, and enjoyment. A remarkable reminder that even in a bustling Roman city beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius, life was not lived entirely through work. There was also time for rest, time for friendship, time for laughter, time to sit in warm water while conversation drifted gently through the steam. And as the evening settles over Pompeii once more, the city's places of leisure grow calm. The pools reflect fading light. The theater seats stand empty beneath the darkening sky. The gardens become quiet. The lamps begin to glow. And the people of Pompeii, having worked, gathered, talked, and relaxed, make their way home through streets that still hold the warmth of the day. For much of our journey through Pompeii, we have explored the city through its streets, houses, markets, temples, workshops, baths, and gardens. We have listened to fountains. We have walked along stone roads worn smooth by countless footsteps. We have stepped inside painted rooms and watched daily routines unfold. Yet there is another side of Pompeii that deserves our attention. Perhaps the most important side of all, the people themselves. Not the emperors, not the generals, not the famous names recorded in history, but ordinary families, parents and children, neighbors and friends, teachers and students, people whose names are mostly forgotten, yet whose lives formed the true heart of the city. What makes Pompeii so remarkable is that it preserved traces of these ordinary lives with unusual clarity. When we look closely, we begin to see not only buildings, but relationships, not only walls, but conversations, not only objects, but memories. And through those traces, the city begins to feel wonderfully human. Imagine Pompeii shortly after sunrise. The first light touches the rooftops. Fountains continue their steady song. Doors begin to open. The smell of baking bread drifts through the air. Across the city, families are waking. Parents begin preparing for the day ahead. Children rub sleep from their eyes. Servants move through households attending to morning tasks. Some families gather for a simple meal before work begins. Others prepare to open shops attached to their homes. The city slowly stretches awake. In many ways, the morning would feel familiar to us. Different clothing, different customs, different surroundings. Yet the rhythm of family life remains surprisingly recognizable. People cared for one another. They worried about one another. They shared responsibilities. They built lives together. And that simple reality links us to Pompeii across nearly 2,000 years. Let us begin with the youngest residents of the city, the children. It is easy to imagine them running through courtyards, chasing one another beneath colonnades, or playing along quieter side streets while adults remained nearby. Children were everywhere in Pompeii. Though history often focuses on rulers and public events, most ancient cities were filled with young voices. The evidence survives in touching ways. Archaeologists have discovered toys, small objects, and household items that remind us children were an important part of daily life. Some toys were simple: balls, miniature figures, small wheeled objects, things designed not for survival or business, but for play. This matters because play is one of the most universal human experiences. Across cultures and centuries, children invent games. They create imaginary worlds. They find joy in ordinary objects. A child in Pompeii may have laughed at a game that would still seem familiar today. the details have changed, the instinct has not. Imagine a sunny afternoon in a courtyard garden. Adults sit nearby discussing household matters. Water splashes quietly from a fountain. A child rolls a toy across the stone pavement. Another gathers pebbles for a game. The city beyond continues its business. Yet inside the courtyard, childhood unfolds at its own pace. These are not the moments usually recorded in official histories, yet they formed the foundation of countless lives. Over time, children would grow into the responsibilities expected of adults. Education played an important role in that process. Not every child received the same opportunities. Social class mattered, family resources mattered, yet learning remained highly valued throughout Roman society. Imagine a young student carrying writing materials through the streets of Pompeii. The morning air remains cool. Shopkeepers prepare their stalls. The student walks carefully toward a teacher's home or classroom. Lessons may include reading, writing, mathematics, memorization, rhetoric. The ability to speak effectively was especially admired in Roman culture. Words carried power. Education, therefore, offered opportunity. Picture a classroom for a moment. Students sit together while a teacher guides the lesson. Wax tablets rest in their hands. Letters are practiced. Passages are repeated aloud. Some students concentrate carefully. Others occasionally allow their attention to wander. Certain experiences, it seems, never truly change. What makes this fascinating is that the voices of these students have vanished, yet the tools of learning remain. Writing implements, tablets, household libraries, all provide small glimpses into intellectual life within the city. Pompeii was not only a place of commerce and agriculture, it was also a place where knowledge was valued. Yet learning occurred far beyond formal education. Children learned from parents, from relatives, from neighbors, from observing daily work. A baker's child might spend years watching dough being prepared. A merchant's child might learn the rhythms of trade. A farmer's child might understand seasons long before reaching adulthood. Knowledge passed naturally through families, generation after generation. In that sense, the entire city served as a classroom. While children occupied one part of family life, parents carried many responsibilities. Mothers and fathers worked to maintain households, manage finances, build relationships, and secure opportunities for the future. The details varied greatly depending upon wealth and social standing, yet certain concerns remained timeless. How to provide food, how to ensure stability, how to protect those you love, how to prepare children for adulthood. Imagine a mother moving through a Pompeian home during the middle of the day. Servants may assist with certain tasks, depending on the household. Meals require planning. Supplies require management. Guests may arrive unexpectedly. Religious observances must be remembered. Family relationships require attention. The work is constant, even when it appears invisible. Much of history was built upon such labor, quiet, daily, uncelebrated, yet essential. Women occupied a variety of roles within Pompeian society. Some managed substantial households. Some participated in business activities. Others oversaw property and finances. Evidence from inscriptions and records suggests that women could possess influence and economic independence to a degree that sometimes surprises modern observers. What makes this fascinating is that Pompeii often preserves traces of individuals who might otherwise have disappeared from history. A name on a wall, a business connection, a household dedication, a portrait. These fragments allow us to glimpse lives that once unfolded behind the city's doors. Picture a woman walking through the forum during the afternoon. She exchanges greetings with acquaintances. She purchases supplies. She visits a temple. She discusses family matters with friends. The scene feels ordinary, and because it feels ordinary, it feels real. History often survives through extraordinary events. Pompeii preserves ordinary ones, and perhaps that is its greatest gift. Of course, family life extended beyond parents and children. Many households included grandparents, relatives, servants, freed people, apprentices, and guests. The Roman household was often larger and more complex than the modern nuclear family. Several generations might live under one roof. Responsibilities overlapped, relationships intertwined. Imagine entering a busy household as evening approaches. Someone prepares food. Someone else completes a task in the courtyard. Children move between rooms. Older family members share stories. Visitors arrive. A servant carries a lamp. The house feels alive, not because of any single person, but because of the many relationships connecting everyone together. This reminds us that family life is rarely simple. It is a network of obligations, affections, frustrations, loyalties, and memories. Pompeii was no different. The same human complexity existed beneath its painted ceilings and tiled roofs. Beyond family relationships stood another important part of social life: friendship. The people of Pompeii lived in a community where daily interaction mattered enormously. The city was walkable. Neighbors encountered one another frequently. Shopkeepers recognized familiar customers. Conversations developed naturally in public spaces. Imagine walking through Pompeii on an ordinary morning. You pass people you know. Greetings are exchanged. Small bits of news are shared. Questions are asked. Answers are given. The interaction lasts only moments. Yet over months and years, these countless small encounters help create a sense of belonging. Roman culture placed great importance on greetings and social connections. Morning visits formed part of daily life for some residents. Friends, clients, associates, they might call upon one another to exchange information, request assistance, or maintain relationships. To modern eyes, some of these customs may seem formal. Yet beneath the structure lies something familiar. People wanted connection. They wanted community. They wanted to know where they belonged. Over time, these social bonds helped hold the city together. Not laws alone, not buildings alone. People, the human relationships that transformed streets into neighborhoods. This becomes especially clear when we examine the evidence left behind. Pompeian graffiti often mentions friendships, rivalries, admiration, and affection. Election notices reveal support networks. Household decorations reflect family pride. Portraits celebrate relationships. Everywhere we look, we find signs of social life. The city was never merely a collection of structures. It was a web of human connections. As afternoon slowly gives way to evening, let us pause for a moment and imagine one final scene. A family gathers within a courtyard home. The heat of the day begins to fade. A fountain murmurs quietly nearby. Oil lamps wait to be lit. Children finish their games. Adults discuss tomorrow's plans. Someone tells a story. Someone laughs softly. The smell of dinner drifts through the air. Beyond the walls, thousands of similar moments unfold throughout Pompeii. Different families, different homes, different circumstances, yet the same basic rhythms: work, learning, friendship, responsibility, affection, routine. These moments rarely attract attention from historians studying wars and emperors, yet they are the moments most people actually lived. And because Pompeii preserved them so well, we can still sense their presence. The toys remain. The writing tablets remain. The portraits remain. The houses remain. Even the worn thresholds crossed by countless family members still survive. The evidence still speaks, quietly, patiently, across the centuries. It tells us that Pompeii was not simply a Roman city beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. It was a place where children learned their first letters, where parents planned for the future, where friends greeted one another in the streets, where families gathered around evening meals, where ordinary lives unfolded day after day. And in that sense, the city becomes something more than an archaeological site. It becomes familiar, a place separated from us by time, yet connected to us through experiences we still understand. The laughter of children, the comfort of friendship, the responsibilities of family, the hope that tomorrow will be a good day. These are among the oldest human stories, and within the preserved streets of Pompeii, they remain waiting for us still. For much of our journey, we have remained within the streets of Pompeii. We have wandered through its neighborhoods. We have listened to fountains and courtyards. We have visited bakeries, bathhouses, temples, gardens, and homes. Yet beyond the city walls stretched another world, a world of sea breezes and vineyards, a world of orchards and country roads, a world of luxurious villas overlooking one of the most beautiful coastlines in the Roman world. To understand why people loved this region so deeply, we must leave the city for a little while and step into the wider landscape of Campania. Imagine standing just outside Pompeii on a clear morning. The city lies behind you. Ahead, the countryside unfolds beneath a broad blue sky. Rows of grapevines follow the contours of the land. Olive trees shimmer gently in the sunlight. Country paths wind between farms and estates. The air carries the scent of earth warmed by the sun. Birdsong drifts from distant groves, and beyond it all lies the Bay of Naples. Calm, bright, endlessly inviting. The Romans considered Campania one of the most desirable regions in Italy. Its climate was mild. Its soil was fertile. Its scenery was admired throughout the empire. Writers praised its beauty. Wealthy families built homes here. Travelers arrived from distant cities. What makes this fascinating is that many people in the ancient world dreamed of spending time in Campania, just as people today dream of visiting beautiful coastal regions. The attraction was not only practical, it was emotional. People came for the views, for the weather, for the atmosphere, for the pleasure of being there. Imagine walking along a hillside road overlooking the bay. The sea sparkles below. Fishing boats move slowly across the water. The distant shoreline curves gently toward the horizon. Small farms dot the landscape. The sounds of the city feel far away. Life seems to move at a slower pace. This matters because the beauty of the region shaped how people experienced daily life. The landscape was not merely a backdrop. It was part of the attraction, part of the identity of the area, part of what made Pompeii and its surroundings so special. Scattered across this landscape stood villas, some modest, some grand, some functioning primarily as working agricultural estates, others designed as luxurious retreats. The word villa can mean many things in the Roman world. At its simplest, it could describe a country property connected to farming. At its most elaborate, it could become an extraordinary residence filled with gardens, artwork, fountains, and breathtaking views. Imagine approaching one of these villas in the late morning. A long entrance road leads toward the property. Trees provide welcome shade. Stone walls mark boundaries. The building gradually comes into view. Columns frame the entrance. Gardens stretch beyond. The sea glimmers in the distance. The entire setting feels carefully arranged, not to dominate nature, but to enjoy it. Roman architects often designed villas to embrace the surrounding landscape. Windows and porticos captured views. Gardens blended indoor and outdoor spaces. Dining areas opened toward the scenery. The result was a style of living closely connected to the environment. Imagine standing beneath a shaded colonnade. The afternoon sun brightens the countryside beyond. A gentle breeze moves through the columns. Somewhere nearby, water flows into a fountain basin. The view extends across vineyards toward the bay. Nothing urgent demands attention. Nothing interrupts the moment. The landscape itself becomes part of daily life. What makes this remarkable is that many villa owners intentionally sought these experiences. The villa was not merely a place to sleep. It was a place to appreciate beauty, to read, to think, to entertain guests, to escape the pressures of urban life. Even in the ancient world, people sometimes longed for peace and quiet. The villa offered that possibility. Of course, not every villa functioned solely as a retreat. Many remained productive agricultural centers. Workers cultivated fields. Harvests were managed. Wine was produced. Olives were processed. Livestock required attention. The beauty of the landscape existed alongside practical labor. Imagine an estate during harvest season. Workers move among the vines. Baskets gradually fill with grapes. Conversations drift across the fields. The sun climbs steadily overhead. Nearby, managers oversee operations while household activities continue within the villa itself. The scene combines elegance and work, comfort and responsibility. The Romans often valued this balance. A successful estate represented both wealth and productivity, and nowhere was this more evident than in the vineyards surrounding Pompeii. The volcanic soil of the region proved exceptionally fertile. Generations of farmers cultivated grapes here. Wine became one of Campania's most important products. Imagine rows of vines stretching across gentle slopes beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. At this point in our story, the mountain still appears peaceful. Its slopes support agriculture. Its presence feels reassuring rather than threatening. Farmers work the land as their ancestors had done before them. Season follows season. Harvest follows harvest. The result is abundance. This reminds us of something important. For the people living here, Vesuvius was not primarily a symbol of danger. It was part of the landscape they loved, part of the scenery visible from gardens and villas, part of the environment that helped sustain local agriculture. The future remained unseen. The present felt secure. Among the most beautiful features of Roman villas were their gardens. These spaces occupied a special place in Roman life. Some were carefully arranged with geometric precision. Others emphasized shade, flowers, and flowing water. Many combined sculpture, plants, pathways, and decorative features into harmonious compositions. Imagine walking through such a garden. Gravel crunches softly beneath your sandals. Flowers add subtle color to the landscape. Birds move among the trees. A fountain sends water gently into a stone basin. Sunlight filters through leaves overhead. The air feels cooler here. Protected, peaceful, the garden becomes a place for reflection, a place for conversation, a place where time seems to slow. What makes this fascinating is that Roman gardens often attempted to create idealized versions of nature, not wilderness, not untamed forests, but cultivated beauty. Nature carefully arranged for enjoyment. a balance between order and growth. Many villa owners invested considerable effort into these spaces because they understood something people still understand today. A beautiful garden can change the mood of an entire day. Beyond the garden stood dining rooms designed to take advantage of the scenery. Meals in these settings could become memorable experiences. Imagine guests gathering during the evening. The heat of the day has begun to fade. The bay reflects the golden colors of sunset. Lamps await lighting. Servants prepare food. Conversations begin. The view itself becomes part of the gathering. Guests look outward toward the sea, toward distant hills, toward vineyards stretching across the landscape. The setting encourages relaxation. It encourages appreciation. It encourages gratitude. In that sense, architecture and nature worked together. The villa did not hide the landscape. It celebrated it. And perhaps nowhere is the beauty of Campania more apparent than during these quiet evening hours. Picture the Bay of Naples beneath the soft light of sunset. The sea glows gently. Fishing boats return toward shore. Shadows lengthen across the vineyards. The distant outline of Mount Vesuvius rests peacefully against the sky. Everything appears calm, balanced, timeless. This is the world many residents knew and loved, a world worth preserving. A world filled not only with cities, but with gardens, orchards, villas, and coastal views. When modern visitors think of Pompeii, they often focus upon the dramatic events that eventually unfolded. Yet before those events came centuries of ordinary life. Centuries during which people admired sunsets over the bay, walked through gardens, tended vineyards, hosted friends, read beneath shaded porticos, and enjoyed one of the most beautiful landscapes in the Roman world. This matters because understanding Pompeii means understanding what existed before it was lost. The city was valuable not merely because of its buildings. The region was valuable not merely because of its prosperity. People cared about these places. They found happiness here. They built lives here. The villas of Campania remind us of that truth. They reveal a world shaped by beauty as much as necessity, a world where architecture framed the sea, where gardens softened the boundaries between nature and home, where fountains murmured beneath warm skies, where the view from a terrace could become one of life's quiet pleasures. And as evening settles over the countryside once more, the villas grow peaceful, the gardens become still, the vineyards darken beneath the fading light. The last colors of sunset linger above the bay. And beyond the fields, beyond the orchards, beyond the elegant homes and quiet pathways, Mount Vesuvius watches over the landscape exactly as it has for generations. Silent, beautiful, familiar, a sleeping presence within a paradise that seemed destined to last forever. For most of our journey through Pompeii, the city has felt wonderfully alive. We have walked through its streets. We have listened to its fountains. We have rested in its gardens. We have watched merchants open their shops and families gather for evening meals. We have admired painted walls and followed quiet paths through the countryside of Campania. The world has seemed stable, comfortable, familiar, and for the people who lived there, it often felt that way as well. Yet as we move gently toward the final chapters of our story, we begin to notice small details that would later take on greater meaning. Not dramatic signs, not obvious warnings, not anything that caused daily life to stop. Rather, subtle disturbances woven into ordinary experience. The kind of events people notice, discuss for a while, and then continue living alongside. This is important to remember. The people of Pompeii did not spend their days waiting for disaster. They were not walking through the city filled with dread. They were living their lives, making plans, repairing homes, planting vineyards, raising children, thinking about tomorrow much as they had thought about tomorrow for years. And so, to understand these years of warning, we must set aside the knowledge that history gives us. We know what eventually happened. They did not. Imagine standing in Pompeii during an ordinary afternoon sometime in the years before the eruption. The streets are busy. A fountain splashes steadily nearby. The smell of bread drifts from a bakery. Merchants negotiate prices. Children move through courtyards. Nothing seems unusual. Then, perhaps, there is a slight tremor beneath your feet, a brief movement, a subtle vibration, a moment lasting only seconds. Dust falls from a wall. A few people pause, others barely notice. The tremor ends. Conversation resumes. Business continues. The city moves forward. What makes this fascinating is that earthquakes were not unknown in the region. Campania had experienced them before. The ground occasionally shifted. Buildings occasionally required repair. People adapted. Life continued. A tremor was inconvenient. It was not necessarily alarming. Over time, the residents of Pompeii became accustomed to living with occasional instability beneath the earth. This reminds us how easily human beings adjust to recurring conditions. What feels unusual at first can gradually become familiar. A person who experiences small tremors year after year may stop treating them as extraordinary. They become part of the background rhythm of life. Something noticed, then accepted, then largely ignored. Yet one event stood apart from the others. In the year 62 C, a particularly powerful earthquake struck the region. Its effects were felt throughout Pompeii and neighboring communities. Buildings suffered damage, walls cracked, columns collapsed. Temples required repair, homes needed restoration. The earthquake left visible marks upon the city. Imagine the scene afterward. Dust settles slowly through the air. Residents move through familiar streets now altered by damage. Workers inspect structures. Families assess their homes. Masons discuss repairs. The city remains standing. But the earthquake has changed it, not destroyed it. Changed it. This matters because much of the Pompeii later uncovered by archaeologists was still in the process of recovery. Many buildings show signs of ongoing repairs. Scaffolding likely stood in various locations. Construction materials remained visible. Walls were being rebuilt. Decorations restored. The city was healing. And healing takes time. Imagine walking through Pompeii several years after the earthquake. A visitor might notice workers repairing a facade. Elsewhere, painters refresh damaged interiors. Builders replace weakened sections of masonry. The sounds of construction blend with the sounds of ordinary life. Hammering, conversation, moving carts. Nothing about the scene suggests a city abandoned or defeated. Quite the opposite. It suggests determination, people investing in the future, people expecting life to continue. And why would they not? Cities recover from disasters. Communities rebuild. History offers countless examples. For the residents of Pompeii, repair work represented optimism, a belief that tomorrow mattered, a belief that their city remained worth improving. Over time, the damage gradually became part of the landscape. Some structures recovered quickly, others took longer. Life adapted around the repairs. Markets remained active. Bathhouses continued operating. Religious ceremonies continued. Families continued raising children. The rhythm of daily existence remained surprisingly resilient. Yet beneath the city, forces beyond human observation continued their slow work. The people above could not see them. They could only experience occasional hints. A tremor, a crack, a vibration, a reminder that the earth was never entirely still. Imagine lying awake during the night. The city is quiet. A faint movement passes through the ground. Perhaps it wakes you briefly. Perhaps it does not. The tremor ends. Silence returns. Morning arrives. The event becomes another small memory among many. For modern observers, such moments seem significant because we know what followed. For the people experiencing them, they were simply part of life. This difference between hindsight and experience is one of the most important lessons Pompeii offers. History often appears obvious when viewed backward. Living through it feels very different. The future remains hidden, even when signs exist. Beyond the city itself, the surrounding countryside continued to flourish. Vineyards produced grapes. Farmers worked the fertile soil. Olive groves remained productive. Country villas welcomed visitors. The landscape retained its beauty. Imagine a hillside vineyard during harvest season. Workers move between rows of vines. Baskets fill gradually with fruit. The sun warms the fields. The mountain rises nearby. Peaceful, green, familiar, Mount Vesuvius does not yet appear threatening. To many residents, it is simply part of the scenery. A landmark visible from roads, gardens, and terraces. Something permanent. Something dependable. What makes this remarkable is that the very mountain later remembered for destruction was also associated with life. Its slopes supported agriculture. Its presence shaped the landscape. Its volcanic soil contributed to the fertility that made Campania prosperous. The relationship between the people and the mountain was not one of fear. It was one of familiarity, and familiarity often softens caution. This reminds us that danger does not always appear dangerous. Sometimes it appears beautiful. Sometimes it appears ordinary. Sometimes it becomes part of the background of daily life. Yet there were other subtle signs. Ancient writers later described unusual phenomena in the years leading up to the eruption. Small disturbances. Change is difficult to interpret. Events that attracted little lasting attention at the time. Perhaps water sources behaved differently. Perhaps certain tremors occurred more frequently. Perhaps animals reacted in ways people only later remembered. The details remain uncertain, the evidence incomplete, and that uncertainty is part of the story. The people of Pompeii were not receiving clear instructions from history. They were experiencing ordinary life mixed with occasional irregularities. Nothing more. Imagine sitting in a garden one evening. A fountain murmurs softly. The air carries the scent of nearby vineyards. The mountain stands dark against the fading sky. Neighbors discuss repairs taking place elsewhere in the city. Someone mentions a recent tremor. Another shrugs. The conversation moves on. Dinner is served. Lamps are lit. The evening continues. This may seem surprising to us, yet human beings have always been skilled at adapting to uncertainty. Most people cannot live in a state of constant concern. Eventually, ordinary routines reassert themselves. Work must be done, meals prepared, children taught, fields cultivated. Life continues because life must continue. And so the years passed. The city repaired itself. The countryside remained productive. The temples welcomed worshippers. The baths filled with conversation. The markets opened each morning. Visitors arrived. Ships crossed the bay. The routines we have spent so much time exploring remained largely intact. Pompeii was still Pompeii, a living city, a thriving community, a place filled with plans for the future. And perhaps that is the most poignant part of this chapter. The warnings existed, but they existed within ordinary life, not outside it. The signs were scattered, subtle, difficult to interpret. The people living beneath Mount Vesuvius could not step outside history and view their circumstances from above. They could only see what stood before them: a city under repair, a beautiful landscape, a productive countryside, a familiar mountain. And so they continued building, continued planting, continued decorating homes, continued raising families, continued making plans for years yet to come. As evening settles once more over Pompeii, let us picture the city from a distance. The Bay of Naples reflects the fading light. Vineyards stretch across the countryside. Smoke rises gently from household hearths. Workers return home. Lamps begin to glow behind windows. The sounds of the day soften. And above it all stands Mount Vesuvius. Quiet, green, peaceful, its slopes touched by the last golden light of sunset. A mountain so familiar that most people no longer thought much about it. A mountain that seemed, as it always had, simply part of the landscape. And beneath that calm appearance, unseen forces continued their patient work far below the earth. Still hidden, still silent, waiting beyond the horizon of human understanding. The morning arrived gently over Pompeii. Soft light spread across the rooftops, touching red tiles that had warmed beneath countless sunrises before. Beyond the city, the waters of the Bay of Naples reflected pale bands of gold and silver. Fishing boats moved quietly upon the sea, and a light breeze drifted inland, carrying the scent of salt water, vineyards, and distant gardens. Above it all stood Mount Vesuvius. The mountain watched over the landscape just as it had for generations. To the people of Pompeii, it was part of the scenery of everyday life. It appeared in paintings. It stood beyond fields and villas. Travelers admired its green slopes. Farmers cultivated fertile soil that had enriched harvests for centuries. On this particular morning, few people gave the mountain much thought. And that is what makes this day so remarkable. No one awoke believing they were living inside a moment that would be remembered for thousands of years. It was simply another day. Another ordinary morning in ancient Pompeii. As the first light entered narrow streets, household servants were already beginning their work. Doors opened. Courtyards stirred to life. Water splashed into basins. Brooms swept yesterday's dust from stone floors. In quiet atriums, rainwater pools reflected the brightening sky. A family might gather for a simple breakfast before the day's responsibilities began. Bread from the previous day rested on wooden tables. Fruit sat in bowls. Small lamps that had glowed through the night were extinguished one by one. The city was waking, not quickly, not noisily, simply following rhythms that had repeated thousands of times before. Imagine walking through Pompeii during those early hours. The stone streets would still feel cool beneath your feet. Shadows stretched between buildings. The sound of fountains echoed softly through intersections. Somewhere nearby, a donkey shifted its weight and pulled against a harness. A vendor arranged goods for the day ahead. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing demanded attention. Life moved forward as it always had. This matters because history often preserves kings, generals, and great battles. Pompeii preserved something different. It preserved an ordinary day. And so, as the city awakens around us, let us spend some time there. Let us move slowly. Let us walk through the streets before the sky begins to change. The bakeries were among the first places to become active. Inside one bakery, workers prepared flour while large millstones turned steadily. Donkeys walked familiar circles, powering the heavy stones that ground grain into fine powder. The work required patience. It always had. Clouds of flour drifted through shafts of sunlight, entering from open doorways. Nearby ovens slowly heated. The smell of baking bread began to spread through neighboring streets. For some families, this was simply another working day. The baker's concerns were practical. Would there be enough flour? Would customers arrive on time? Would the day's loaves bake evenly? Questions like these filled minds far more often than thoughts about mountains. Across Pompeii, shopkeepers prepared their businesses. Wooden shutters opened toward busy streets. Merchants arranged goods on counters. Wine sellers inspected storage jars. Market vendors carried baskets filled with fruit, vegetables, olives, and herbs. Some traders discussed prices. Others greeted familiar customers. Many had known one another for years. In that sense, Pompeii was not merely a city. It was a community. People recognized faces. Children grew into adults beside neighbors who remembered their earliest years. Families celebrated marriages, mourned losses, exchanged news, and shared ordinary moments that rarely appear in historical records. Yet here, somehow, traces of those lives endured. As the morning continued, the fountains became gathering places. Fresh water flowed continuously through the city. Citizens arrived carrying containers and jugs. Conversations unfolded naturally. News traveled, opinions were exchanged. Small jokes passed between friends. Perhaps someone complained about a repair project. Perhaps another discussed business opportunities. Perhaps someone simply enjoyed standing beneath the warmth of the morning sun. The exact words are lost. Yet the scene feels surprisingly familiar. Human beings have always gathered beside water. They have always shared stories. They have always paused briefly before returning to the responsibilities of the day. The evidence preserved in Pompeii reminds us how little some things truly change. Beyond the commercial streets, quieter neighborhoods followed their own routines. Inside elegant houses, sunlight entered through open roofs and illuminated painted walls. Garden fountains trickled softly. Birds moved among shrubs and flowers. Household servants carried water, prepared meals, and attended daily tasks. Children practiced lessons. Family members discussed plans for the afternoon. A visitor might arrive carrying news from another part of Campania. Perhaps invitations were exchanged. Perhaps future dinners were discussed. Perhaps someone planned a visit to the baths later that evening. It is easy to imagine these conversations because they are so ordinary, and ordinary life was the true heartbeat of Pompeii. For a moment, let us pause the wider story and simply observe the world around us. Picture a shaded courtyard. A small fountain murmurs quietly. Sunlight touches the leaves of a garden tree. A clay lamp rests near a painted wall. The scent of herbs drifts through warm air. Somewhere beyond the house, footsteps pass along the street. A cart rattles over stone. Voices rise and fade in the distance. Nothing extraordinary is happening. And yet this simple scene would eventually become one of the most valuable windows into everyday Roman life ever discovered. The morning gradually gave way to midday. The streets became busier. Traffic increased. Donkey carts moved through thoroughfares worn smooth by generations of wheels. Stepping stones helped pedestrians cross streets where water and refuse sometimes collected. Workers hurried between appointments. Travelers entered the city. Messengers carried information from place to place. the energy of daily life continued to grow. Near the Thermopolia, the ancient food counters that served quick meals, customers gathered for refreshments. Hot food waited in large containers built into stone counters. Wine mixed with water was poured into cups. Conversations filled the air. Some people stayed only briefly before continuing their work. Others lingered. The atmosphere was social and familiar. Much of Roman life unfolded in public. Meals, business, friendships, and discussions frequently moved beyond household walls and into shared civic spaces. Pompeii was a city where daily life remained visible. That visibility would later become one of its greatest gifts to historians. Throughout the afternoon, the city settled into familiar patterns. The summer air grew warmer. Shadows shortened. In workshops, craftsmen continued their labor. Metal workers shaped tools. Painters worked on decorative projects. Builders repaired structures damaged by earlier earthquakes. Years before, tremors had affected parts of the region, and signs of reconstruction remained visible throughout Pompeii. Walls were being repaired. Scaffolding stood beside certain buildings. Construction projects continued. To modern eyes, these details seem important, yet to many residents they had become part of everyday life. Repairs took time, cities constantly changed, people adapted. The presence of rebuilding did not necessarily inspire alarm. Life continued. What makes this fascinating is the difference between hindsight and experience. We know what was coming. They did not. We see warning signs. They saw ordinary inconveniences. History often works this way. Events that appear obvious in retrospect rarely feel obvious while people are living through them. As afternoon softened toward evening, many citizens began turning their attention toward leisure. The baths attracted visitors seeking relaxation after work. Warm rooms filled with conversation. Steam drifted upward. Water reflected flickering light. Friends met one another. Business relationships were maintained. News circulated through the city. The baths served many purposes beyond cleanliness. They were places of routine, places of connection, places where daily life unfolded at a comfortable pace. Imagine sitting there for a moment. The sounds are gentle. Voices echo from marble surfaces. Water splashes softly. Sandals scrape across stone floors. The outside world feels distant. The city breathes calmly around you. Elsewhere, preparations for evening meals were underway. Kitchen fires were lit. Ingredients were assembled. Bread purchased earlier in the day returned to household tables. Wine jars were opened. Families gathered. Servants completed final tasks before darkness arrived. In homes both large and modest, another ordinary evening approached. The people of Pompeii had plans for tomorrow. That may be the most poignant detail of all. Appointments would be kept. Goods would be sold. Repairs would continue. Letters would be delivered. Meals would be shared. Life stretched confidently into the future. No one knew how short that future had become. As the sun began its slow descent, golden light settled across the city. Painted walls glowed warmly. Gardens darkened beneath lengthening shadows. The Bay of Naples shimmered in the distance. And above everything stood Vesuvius. Quiet, familiar, almost beautiful. Farmers still worked among nearby vineyards. Travelers still moved along roads. Birds crossed the evening sky. The mountain appeared unchanged. The result was a sense of peace that feels almost impossible for us to fully comprehend, because we know what the people below did not. We know that this was the last quiet day, the last day when fountains sang without interruption, the last day when ovens baked ordinary bread, the last day when shopkeepers counted coins, children played. Workers planned tomorrow's tasks, and families gathered beneath painted ceilings. The city remained alive, whole, complete, a living Roman world suspended in one final moment of calm. As evening deepened, lamps began to glow behind doorways. Voices softened. Meals concluded. Some citizens prepared for sleep. Others continued conversations beneath the warm Campanian sky. The stars slowly emerged above rooftops, and somewhere beyond the gardens, the vineyards, the villas, and the quiet streets of Pompeii, a subtle transformation had begun. Few noticed it. Few had reason to. Yet high above Mount Vesuvius, the sky began to change. The sky began to change above Pompeii. At first, it may have seemed like something distant, a strange cloud, a shadow rising where the familiar outline of Mount Vesuvius had always stood. People looked upward from streets, gardens, rooftops, and courtyards. Some paused in doorways. Others stepped away from counters and worktables. The city, which had been moving through its ordinary day, slowly turned its attention toward the mountain. There was no easy explanation. The cloud rose higher. It widened as it climbed, spreading in the upper air like the crown of a great stone pine tree. This was the image later remembered by Pliny the Younger, who watched the event from across the Bay of Naples and described it in a letter that would become one of history's most important eyewitness accounts. From a distance, he saw the eruption of Mount Vesuvius unfold. But inside Pompeii, the experience was not distant at all. Ash began to fall. Light fragments of pumice drifted down from the sky and landed on rooftops, streets, gardens, and open courtyards. At first, people may have watched in confusion. Some may have gathered belongings. Others may have gone back inside, hoping the strange shower would pass. The sound must have been unfamiliar. Small stones tapping on roof tiles, ash settling on awnings, footsteps moving more quickly through streets, voices calling from one doorway to another. It was not yet night, but the daylight began to fade. This matters because the Pompeii eruption was not experienced as one single moment. It unfolded slowly for many people. It changed the city hour by hour, covering familiar places with a pale, falling weight. The streets that had carried carts and conversations now carried uncertainty. The fountains still flowed for a time. The houses still stood. The painted walls, the bakeries, the gardens, and the shops were all still there. Yet the world above them had altered. Imagine standing in an atrium as ash falls through the open roof. A pool of water ripples beneath the impact of tiny fragments. A lamp is lit before evening. A family gathers close. Someone listens at the doorway. Someone wonders whether to leave. Someone else waits. Because leaving a home is never a simple choice. That is one of the most human details of Pompeii. People did not live as symbols. They lived as families, workers, neighbors, travelers, and children. They had homes filled with familiar objects. They had keys, tools, jewelry, coins, lamps, and food. To leave meant choosing quickly what could be carried and what had to remain behind. Across the city, some people began to escape. They moved through streets that were becoming harder to walk. Pumice gathered underfoot. Roofs grew heavier. The air became more difficult. Those who left may have followed roads toward open land or toward the coast, hoping for safety beyond the falling ash. Others stayed. Some may have believed the disturbance would end. Some may have been too old, too young, or too uncertain to travel. Some may have tried to shelter indoors. We cannot know every decision, but we can understand the feeling of hesitation. In moments of danger, people often wait for clarity. They look to neighbors. They look to the sky. They listen for familiar signs. And sometimes history moves faster than certainty. Across the bay, Pliny the Elder, uncle of Pliny the Younger, responded in a way that later generations would remember with quiet admiration. He was a commander of the Roman fleet at Misenum, and when the eruption became visible, he first approached it with curiosity, then with concern for those in danger. Ships moved across the water. The sea, usually a path of travel and trade, became a route of attempted rescue. Ash fell even there. The horizon darkened. The familiar beauty of the Bay of Naples was transformed beneath a sky filled with dust and cloud. Pliny the Younger remained farther away, watching and later writing. Because of him, the eruption was not only buried in the earth, it was preserved in words. His account gives the event a witness, a human voice, a young man trying to describe something vast, strange, and difficult to fully understand. Inside Pompeii, the ash continued to gather. Roofs strained beneath the weight. Rooms that had been places of rest became places of shelter. Gardens disappeared under layers of pale debris. Counters, fountains, shrines, and streets were slowly covered. The city was not burning in the way people might imagine. It was being buried, softly at first, then heavily, layer after layer. A bakery oven that had been warm with bread became surrounded by ash. A painted room lost its daylight. A garden path vanished. A doorway became harder to open. In houses, people may have tied cloth over their faces. They may have held hands. They may have searched for lamps. They may have tried to judge whether it was safer to remain indoors or step into the falling storm outside. The darkness deepened. What makes this moment so powerful is not only the scale of nature, it is the nearness of ordinary life. The objects found at Pompeii are not distant or royal. They are household things: a loaf, a bowl, a key, a lamp, a tool, a coin purse, small possessions that remind us how suddenly ordinary life can become archaeology. As the hours passed, the city grew quieter. The weight of material from Vesuvius changed the shape of streets and courtyards. Some people who had remained inside tried to move when conditions worsened. Others could no longer leave. The details are difficult, and they deserve gentleness. Pompeii was filled with real people, and each life had its own memories, hopes, and connections. For that reason, the remains found there should not be treated as curiosities. They are witnesses. Quiet human traces preserved by an event no one expected to enter history in this way. Nearby towns were also affected. Herculaneum, closer to the mountain and nearer the coast, experienced the eruption differently. Other settlements around the Bay of Naples shared in the disaster, each in its own way. But Pompeii became the name most strongly remembered, perhaps because so much of it remained visible beneath the ash, perhaps because its streets, homes, shops, and wall writings survived with such unusual completeness, perhaps because it preserved not only an ending, but the life that came before it. During the night, the world around Pompeii became almost unrecognizable. Daylight had vanished. Ash and volcanic material filled the air. The mountain continued its eruption. The sound, the darkness, and the falling debris must have made the familiar city feel strange and distant, even to those who had known every street since childhood. Imagine a person trying to find a way through a street they had walked all their life. The stepping stones are partly buried. The fountain is difficult to see. The doorways look different. The air is thick. The city that had once guided them by habit no longer feels like itself. that is a quiet and sorrowful thing. A person can be lost even in a place they know. Across the bay, the witness continued to remember. Pliny the Younger described fear, darkness, and the strange feeling that the world itself seemed to be ending. His words carried the event forward into Roman literature and then into modern history. Without his account, Pompeii would still speak through its ruins. But with his account, we also have the sky, we have the cloud, we have the human attempt to understand the eruption as it happened. This reminds us that history is often preserved in more than one way. Stone preserves streets, ash preserves rooms, writing preserves memory, and together, they allow us to approach the past with care. Eventually, the most dangerous phase arrived. Fast-moving currents of hot gas and volcanic material swept down from Vesuvius and reached Pompeii. They moved through the city and ended the long hours of uncertainty. It is enough to say this gently. The people who remained were overcome. The city fell silent. The houses, shops, temples, bakeries, baths, gardens, and streets were sealed beneath the material of the mountain. Pompeii, which had been so alive only a short time before, disappeared from the open world, not destroyed in the ordinary sense. Hidden, covered, held in darkness, preserved, in the days and years that followed, the landscape changed. The outlines of streets vanished, roofs collapsed, earth settled over walls. Plants returned. Travelers passed without fully knowing what lay below. Generations came and went. The Roman world itself changed. Empires shifted. Languages evolved. Names were remembered, forgotten, and rediscovered. And beneath all of it, Pompeii slept. The city kept its secrets quietly. Inside the buried rooms, bread remained in ovens. Paintings remained on walls. Graffiti remained scratched into plaster. Tools remained where hands had last placed them. The shapes of people remained in the hardened ash, not as spectacle, but as solemn evidence that this was once a living city. Centuries later, archaeologists would find these spaces and understand something extraordinary. The eruption had ended Pompeii, but it had also preserved Pompeii. That is the strange and tender paradox at the heart of the story. Without Vesuvius, Pompeii might have faded like many other Roman towns, changed by time, rebuilt, reused, and slowly erased. Because of Vesuvius, one day remained. A day of footsteps, a day of meals, a day of fountains, a day of work, conversation, prayer, rest, and ordinary plans. The ash became a covering. The darkness became a kind of sealed memory, and the city waited beneath the earth until another age was ready to listen. So as we leave this difficult part of the journey, we do so quietly. We do not hurry past it, and we do not linger harshly within it. We simply remember that Pompeii was more than its final hours. It was a Roman city of bakers and gardeners, children and merchants, worshippers and travelers, artists and families. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius brought that life to an end, but it also allowed the smallest traces of that life to cross the centuries. A loaf of bread, a painted room, a fountain basin, a name on a wall, a key held close. These are the gentle fragments that remain, and beneath the ash, the city slept, waiting to be found again. For a very long time, Pompeii disappeared. Not completely, not in memory, but in the physical landscape of the Bay of Naples. The city that had once echoed with footsteps, market voices, flowing fountains, and the sounds of everyday Roman life gradually slipped beneath fields, vineyards, pathways, and centuries of passing time. Generations lived and died above it. Farmers worked the land. Travelers crossed the region, new villages appeared, roads changed, empires rose and fell. The Roman world itself slowly transformed into something new, and beneath all of it, Pompeii remained. Silent, hidden, waiting. This is one of the most remarkable parts of the story. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius had buried the city so completely that many people eventually forgot its exact location. The memory of the disaster survived in ancient writings. The name Pompeii survived. The mountain remained. Yet the streets themselves disappeared from view. The bakeries, the bathhouses, the temples, the gardens, the painted homes, all rested beneath layers of volcanic material and earth. In a strange way, the city entered a long sleep. Imagine standing in the countryside many centuries later. You see fields, perhaps a vineyard, perhaps a narrow road winding through the landscape. Birdsong drifts across the warm air. Nothing around you suggests that an entire Roman city lies hidden beneath your feet. And yet below the surface, streets still exist. Doorways still stand. Wall paintings still cling to plaster. Lamps still rest where they were left. It is a remarkable thought, a whole world surviving in darkness while the centuries pass overhead. Over time, small discoveries began to occur. Workers digging wells or foundations occasionally encountered fragments of ancient walls. Pieces of stone appeared where none were expected. Sometimes inscriptions emerged, sometimes statues, sometimes mysterious traces of structures whose origins were not immediately understood. At first, these discoveries seemed disconnected. Interesting, perhaps, but incomplete. No one yet understood the full scale of what remained below. The buried city revealed itself slowly, almost reluctantly, as though Pompeii were awakening one room at a time. During the 18th century, more organized excavations began to take place under the rule of the Bourbon kings of Naples. Workers searching for ancient treasures dug tunnels into buried structures. Paintings emerged from darkness. Statues appeared. Decorated rooms astonished visitors. Ancient objects, untouched for centuries, returned once more to daylight. For many people, the discoveries felt almost magical. Imagine carrying a lamp through a tunnel beneath the earth. The air is cool and still. The silence feels ancient. Then, in the flickering light, colors appear on a wall. Red, yellow, black, blue, painted centuries earlier by hands long gone. The room has not seen sunlight since the day of the eruption. And now, after nearly 1,700 years, someone stands there again. The scale of that moment is astonishing. What makes this fascinating is that Pompeii was unlike most archaeological sites. Many ancient cities survive only as foundations or scattered ruins. Time, weather, rebuilding, and human activity gradually erase details. Pompeii experienced something different. Because it had been buried so quickly, countless ordinary objects remained exactly where people had left them. This transformed the city into an extraordinary time capsule. Not a preserved empire, not a preserved battlefield, a preserved day. As excavations expanded, archaeologists encountered evidence of everyday life everywhere they looked. A kitchen still contained cooking equipment, a workshop still held tools, a shop still preserved traces of business activity. Even graffiti remained visible upon walls. The voices of ordinary people had somehow survived. A joke, a greeting, a name, a political message, a declaration of affection. Words written casually by people who never imagined anyone would read them 2,000 years later. This reminds us that history is not only created by famous individuals, it is also created by countless ordinary people living ordinary days. Pompeii preserved those people unusually well. As more streets emerged from the earth, visitors found themselves walking through an ancient city that felt strangely familiar. The roads remained visible. Wheel ruts crossed stone surfaces. Stepping stones still bridged the streets. Public fountains remained in place. Household shrines stood quietly in corners. The city retained its shape, its rhythm, its human scale. It was possible to imagine life returning at any moment. Imagine walking through one of these excavated streets. The afternoon sun warms the stone. A fountain basin stands nearby. Doorways open into dark interiors. Painted walls glow softly with surviving colors. The city feels empty, yet not abandoned. Instead, it feels paused, as though time itself briefly stopped moving. And perhaps that feeling explains why Pompeii fascinates so many people. It does not feel like a distant civilization. It feels like a neighborhood whose residents have only recently stepped away. One of the most important figures in Pompeii's modern story was the archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli. During the 19th century, he introduced methods that transformed how the site was studied. Rather than focusing only on valuable treasures, Fiorelli emphasized understanding the city itself, the streets, the houses, the lives of the people who once lived there. This shift changed everything. Pompeii became more than a collection of artifacts. It became a human story. Fiorelli also developed one of the most famous techniques associated with Pompeii. As archaeologists excavated hardened layers of volcanic material, they occasionally discovered empty spaces within the ash. These voids had once been occupied by organic materials that later disappeared. Fiorelli realized that by carefully filling these spaces with plaster, it was possible to preserve the shapes left behind. The resulting casts became some of the most moving discoveries ever made at the site. They are often discussed because they reveal human forms. Yet perhaps the deeper significance lies elsewhere. They remind us that Pompeii was never merely a collection of buildings. It was a living community. The casts deserve quiet respect. They are not dramatic symbols. They are traces of individuals whose final moments became part of history. And through them, the city speaks with unusual immediacy across the centuries. Yet there was another side to the rediscovery. Not every discovery involved people. Many involved the small objects of daily life. Keys, lamps, jewelry, cooking pots, writing tablets, medical instruments, carpentry tools, garden decorations, children's toys. Each object carried its own story. A key suggests a locked door. A lamp suggests an evening conversation. A cooking pot suggests a family meal. A toy suggests childhood. The result is an archaeological record unlike almost any other in the ancient world. Pompeii allows us to move beyond rulers and battles. It allows us to see ordinary existence. That is a rare gift. Let us pause for a moment and imagine one of these rediscovered rooms. Dust has been carefully cleared away. Sunlight enters through an opening above. A painted wall emerges from shadow. Nearby stands a small table. A lamp rests where someone once placed it. Outside, birds sing in the modern world. Inside, the room remains Roman, separated by nearly 2,000 years, yet somehow still familiar. This gentle blending of past and present gives Pompeii much of its power. The city feels close enough to picture, close enough to understand, close enough to recognize ourselves. As excavations continued through the 20th century and beyond, new neighborhoods emerged, new houses, new workshops, new temples, new gardens. Each discovery added another chapter to the story. Yet an intriguing mystery remained. A large portion of Pompeii still lies beneath the earth. Even today, Archaeologists have not uncovered the entire city. This means that new discoveries continue to appear. A room unseen since the eruption, a painted wall hidden beneath volcanic layers, a household object resting exactly where it was left. The sleeping city is not fully awake. Part of Pompeii still waits in darkness. What makes this fascinating is that the story remains unfinished. Many ancient cities have already revealed most of their secrets. Pompeii continues to whisper new ones. Archaeologists now work carefully, balancing discovery with preservation. Excavation itself can expose fragile materials to weather and time. Sometimes the wisest choice is not to uncover everything at once. Instead, certain areas remain protected beneath the earth until future generations possess even better tools and techniques. In that sense, Pompeii continues to teach patience. The city has already waited nearly 2 millennia. A few more years matter very little. As evening settles over the modern archaeological site, visitors often walk along streets first laid by Roman engineers. The same stones remain. The same views toward Mount Vesuvius remain. The same sunlight touches walls and courtyards. And for a moment, the centuries seem to fold together. A modern traveler pauses where a Roman citizen once paused. A visitor studies graffiti written by someone whose name would otherwise have been forgotten. A child looks into a garden where another child once played. The distance between past and present grows surprisingly small. This, perhaps, is Pompeii's greatest mystery. Not that the city was buried, not that it was rediscovered, but that it feels so alive. The fountains may no longer sing as they once did. The ovens no longer bake bread. The markets no longer open at dawn. Yet the city still possesses a quiet presence, a sense of waiting, a sense of memory, a sense that everyday life never completely vanished. For centuries, Pompeii slept beneath the earth. When it finally opened its eyes again, it offered historians something extraordinarily rare. Not legends, not myths, not distant fragments, but streets. Rooms, objects, conversations scratched into plaster, the preserved traces of ordinary people living ordinary lives. And because of that, the sleeping city became one of history's most remarkable windows into the ancient world. A city lost, a city found, and even now a city still revealing its secrets one quiet discovery at a time. As our journey through Pompeii begins to draw toward its close, it is worth pausing for a moment to consider a simple question. Why does Pompeii remain so memorable? After all, the ancient world contained countless cities. Many were larger, many were wealthier, many played greater roles in politics, warfare, and imperial history. Yet few places have captured the imagination quite like Pompeii. The answer lies not only in what was lost, it lies in what was preserved. Pompeii's greatest gift to history is not the story of a disaster. It is the story of a day, a remarkably ordinary day. That may sound simple, yet it is one of the rarest things in the historical record. History often remembers extraordinary moments, victories, defeats, coronations, revolutions. The names of rulers and generals survive because their actions shaped nations and empires. Ordinary life is much harder to preserve. A loaf of bread disappears, a conversation fades, a footprint vanishes, the sound of a fountain becomes memory. The details of daily existence are usually carried away by time. Pompeii was different. Because the city was buried so suddenly, countless fragments of everyday life remained where they were. And when those fragments emerged again centuries later, they revealed something extraordinary. They revealed people, not symbols, not legends. People, A baker preparing bread before dawn, a merchant opening a shop, a child learning lessons, a family sharing an evening meal, a traveler arriving from another town, a worshiper leaving an offering at a shrine, a gardener tending plants beneath the warm Campanian sun. These are the lives that Pompeii preserved. This matters because most ancient people never expected to be remembered. Their names rarely appeared in official histories. Their achievements were not recorded in grand monuments. They lived quietly, worked steadily, raised families, built friendships, and then disappeared into the passing centuries. Yet Pompeii returned many of those lives to us. Not completely. No archaeological site can fully recover a human life, but enough remains to create a sense of connection. A wall inscription, a household object, a painted portrait, a pair of sandals, a lamp placed beside a bed. Small details, human details. The result is a city that feels unusually familiar. Imagine walking through Pompeii once more. The streets are empty now, but their shape remains. Wheel ruts still cross the stone, doorways still open into courtyards, garden walls still surround quiet spaces where flowers once bloomed. The evidence survives today, and through that evidence, it becomes easier to picture the people who once lived there. What makes this fascinating is that Pompeii preserved life at every level of society. Grand houses stand beside modest homes, elegant dining rooms stand beside workshops, temples stand beside taverns, public baths stand beside neighborhood fountains. The city offers a complete picture of a Roman community. Not a perfect picture. Not every story survived, but enough survived to create something remarkably close to a living world. And perhaps that is why Pompeii continues to inspire such curiosity. Visitors do not simply look at ruins. They encounter traces of ordinary existence. They see how people decorated their homes, what they ate, how they worked, how they worshipped, how they relaxed, how they expressed affection, how they complained, how they joked. The city feels human. In that sense, Pompeii reminds us that the ancient world was not populated by distant historical figures moving through textbook pages. It was populated by people whose daily concerns often resembled our own. They worried about business. They planned meals. They repaired buildings. They cared for children. They greeted neighbors. They looked forward to tomorrow. The centuries separating us may be vast, yet many of the experiences remain recognizable. This reminds us of something important. Human history is not only the story of extraordinary events, it is also the story of ordinary moments, a meal shared with family, a conversation between friends, a walk through familiar streets, a quiet afternoon in a garden. These moments rarely attract attention while they are happening, yet together they form the fabric of a life. Pompeii preserved that fabric with unusual clarity. For a moment, picture the city as we first encountered it. Morning sunlight touches tiled rooftops, water flows from stone fountains, the scent of bread drifts through the air. Merchants prepare for another day. Children move through streets on small errands. The Bay of Naples glimmers in the distance, and above it all stands Mount Vesuvius. Quiet, familiar, part of the landscape. The people of Pompeii could not know that future generations would study their city. They could not know that archaeologists would uncover their homes. They could not know that visitors from around the world would one day walk their streets. They simply lived. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of the story. Pompeii was not preserved because its people were trying to leave a message. It was preserved because they were living ordinary lives. The city became history without intending to. The result was a gift unlike almost any other. A preserved Roman day, a preserved Roman neighborhood, a preserved Roman world. Not complete, not frozen in perfection, but close enough to allow us a rare glimpse into everyday life nearly 2,000 years ago. The wonder of Pompeii does not belong solely to archaeologists. It belongs to anyone who has ever wondered how people once lived, how a city sounded at dawn, how a household prepared dinner, how neighbors greeted one another, how children played, how gardens looked beneath the afternoon sun. The answers remain scattered throughout the city, waiting quietly among streets, walls, and courtyards. And so, after everything we have seen together, perhaps Pompeii's greatest gift can be expressed in a single thought. It preserved the ordinary, not an empire, not a war, not a ruler, a day, a meal, a conversation, a loaf of bread cooling after baking, a fountain singing softly beside a street, a gardener pausing to admire growing flowers, a family gathering as evening approaches. Small moments. Yet small moments are what most lives are made of. The memory endured because those moments endured, and through them, the people of Pompeii continue to speak across the centuries, quietly, gently, human to human. That is why the city remains so powerful, not because it was destroyed, but because it was preserved so beautifully. And in preserving a single ordinary day, Pompeii gave history one of its most precious gifts. Now our journey through Pompeii is drawing gently to its end. For a little while tonight, we have wandered through the streets of an ancient Roman city. We have stood beside fountains and walked across worn stepping stones. We have entered quiet homes hidden behind busy streets. We have listened to the sounds of markets, visited gardens filled with sunlight, and watched the rhythms of daily life unfold beneath the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. And now it is time to let that world quiet once more. Allow yourself to settle comfortably. Let your breathing slow. Let the concerns of the present day drift a little farther away. The city has no more demands to place upon you. The journey is complete. Picture Pompeii one final time. The evening sun hangs low above the Bay of Naples. Golden light rests upon rooftops and painted walls. The sea reflects the fading colors of the sky. A soft breeze moves through gardens, where fountains murmur quietly among flowers and stone paths. The city feels calm, unhurried, at peace. The bakeries have finished their work for the day. The ovens slowly cool. The scent of fresh bread lingers faintly in the air. Market stalls have closed their shutters. The voices that once filled the streets have softened into memory. The donkey carts are still. The workshops are silent. The day's labor has come to an end. In quiet homes throughout the city, lamps glow softly. Light spills into courtyards. Water gathers in small reflecting pools beneath open roofs. Garden leaves rustle gently in the evening air. Somewhere a door closes. Somewhere distant footsteps fade away. And then even those sounds disappear. Let your mind wander slowly through those familiar streets. Past the fountains where neighbors once gathered. Past the walls where ordinary people left messages for one another. Past the temples where prayers were offered. Past the bathhouses filled with warm water and conversation. Past the shops and bakeries and small household shrines. The city remains there, waiting quietly beneath the stars. What makes Pompeii so memorable is not simply what happened there. It is the life that came before. The ordinary moments, the simple routines, the countless small experiences that rarely find their way into history books. A family sharing a meal, a gardener tending flowers, a merchant greeting a customer, a child carrying out a small errand through a familiar neighborhood. These are the moments that survived, and perhaps that is why Pompeii continues to speak to us across the centuries. Its greatest lesson is a gentle one. The ordinary parts of life matter. The walks we take, the conversations we have, the meals we share, the familiar places we pass every day. History is often built from moments that seem unremarkable at the time. Pompeii reminds us of that with unusual clarity. Now let the streets grow quieter. The painted walls fade softly into darkness. The fountains continue their gentle song. The gardens settle beneath the evening sky. The last traces of daylight slip beyond the horizon. Above the city, stars begin to appear one by one. The Bay of Naples rests beneath a blanket of moonlight. The sea is calm. The air is cool. And beyond the rooftops, beyond the vineyards and distant villas, Mount Vesuvius stands silently beneath the night sky. No longer a symbol of destruction, simply part of the landscape once again. A mountain watching over the sleeping world below. As the centuries pass, the city remains, its streets preserved, its homes remembered, its people still present through the traces they left behind. A loaf of bread, a painted garden, a fountain basin, a scratched message on a wall, a doorway opening into a quiet courtyard. Tiny fragments of ordinary life. Yet together they tell a story that has endured for nearly 2,000 years. And now, as our own evening comes to a close, we can leave Pompeii exactly as we found it. Peaceful, quiet, resting beneath the stars. The lamps grow dim. The fountains continue their soft and endless song. The gardens drift into shadow. The streets fall silent. And somewhere beyond the rooftops, beyond the courtyards, beyond the sleeping city itself, the mountain stands quietly beneath the night sky. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Pompeii, and thank you for spending part of your evening here on Sleepy Pages of History. May the old city rest peacefully in your imagination. May the voices of the past grow soft and distant. May your thoughts become calm, and may sleep come gently. Sleep well, and good night.